Chapter 378. Green Cliff Planet was famous for its Green Cliff Mountain. The headquarters of Yuanhua sect was built amidst the lofty mountains and lofty ridges that stretched over 10,000 miles around Green Cliff Mountain. Countless peaks were like a host of stars surrounding the moon, surrounding and protecting the Green Cliff Mountain that was 50 kilometers tall and over 10 kilometers wide. It was oddly shaped like a sword, and it was completely translucent and dark green in color, and was formed from a pool of green jade. Immortal cultivators were experienced and knowledgeable, and they had seen all kinds of marvelous sights. But they had never seen or heard of a mountain like Green Cliff Mountain, which was entirely made up of green jade. There was a rumor among the immortal cultivators of Pulyuo Heavenly Realm and the few surrounding heavenly realms that the Green Cliff Mountain was originally the sword of an ancient almighty being. When he died, the sword fell into the Green Cliff Star, and that was how this marvelous scene was created. No matter what people said, it was an undeniable fact that Green Cliff Mountain was a majestic mountain with a beautiful scenery. The cave abode of Patriarch Yuanhua, the founding patriarch of Yuanhua sect, was located right in the middle of Green Cliff Mountain. Halfway up the mountain, there was a platform about 1 acre in circumference, with a crescent-shaped arch at the end. A few young boys were seen standing in front of the arch with their hands hanging down. Together with the purple Ganoderma immortal herbs, white cranes, black deer, and many other plants in the vicinity, it gave off a very immortal atmosphere. Inside the cave abode was a small cave abode that measured nearly 1,000 miles in circumference. It was a small cave abode created by Patriarch Yuanhua using his own immortal energy. Several hundred energy veins were gathered under the cave abode, transforming the natural energies into immortal energy through an excellent quality energy condensing and immortal ascension ball. As a result, this small cave abode was filled with immortal energy, only slightly weaker than Song Ao Immortal Abode. It was in this small cave abode named Green Cliff Immortal Abode that Wu Qi met Patriarch Yuanhua for the first time in front of an exquisite wooden hut. It was surrounded by towering cypress trees, giving off a quiet and ethereal atmosphere. Apart from a few birds squatting on the branches and Patriarch Yuanhua sitting on a hassock in front of the wooden house, there were no other living beings in this place. Taoist Qi strode to the front of the wooden house and roared, "Master, that Jiang Yun, who was forced to leave the sect because he used a sword to injure a fellow disciple, is back. He brought 110 disciples with him, and each of them is an expert." TSK, just now, Junior Marshall Brother was trying to find trouble with them and was chased away by this disciple with a bamboo stick. Patriarch Yuanhua was thin as a pine tree, but the right half of his upper body was gone, and was now wrapped in a white veil. Slowly, he opened his eyes, and a faint stream of purple-green immortal energy sprayed out of his nostrils. He nodded slowly and said in a low voice, "It's Jiang Yun? Back then, you took the blame for Green Staff. But no matter what, you have to be punished for injuring a fellow disciple." Clearing his throat, Patriarch Yuanhua said slowly, "As for this, if your disciple can win the match against Huiling sect, I'll let you return to our sect with this credit. Don't be an outer sect disciple. With your current cultivation, you're qualified to be an inner sect elder." Patriarch Jiang Yun dropped to his knees and gave Patriarch Yuanhua a few kowtows reverently, then answered in a low voice, "Yes." After Immortal Green Staff brought Wu Qi and the others to greet Patriarch Yuanhua, Taoist Qi plopped himself down next to Patriarch Yuanhua and shouted, "But, Master, Junior Marshall Brothers' disciple has also brought a group of disciples with him. Are you really going to let Jiang Yun's disciples participate in the match?" Patriarch Yuanhua nodded and said with a smile, "Just now, Mo Luan brought his disciples to greet me as well. But White Sparrow's disciples are far weaker than Jiang Yun's disciples. As I'm the leader of Yunhua sect, naturally, I have to do everything for the sake of the sect. I'll let whoever has a higher chance of winning go." Patriarch Yuanhua coughed lightly, and some golden blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth. Helplessly, he pointed at the missing half of his body and said with a bitter smile, "I've embarrassed myself in front of you, my children. Reverend Huilin, the founding ancestral master of Huiling sect, has a cultivation base similar to mine. That day, We fought each other with all our might, and as a result, both of us were severely wounded. Wu Qi twitched his lips. The injury was indeed a miserable one. 4 heaven immortals, especially those middle and high-tier heaven immortals, their immortal bodies were the result of hundreds of thousands, millions, or even tens of millions of years of hard work. Ordinary immortal spells could hardly seriously injure them, but once they were wounded, the source of immortal energy would be severely damaged, and the injury would be extremely difficult to heal. For the injury Patriarch Yuan Hua was suffering right now, without 2 periods of dedicated cultivation, or without the help of immortal pills of excellent quality, it would be extremely difficult for him to recover. Wu Qi, who happened to be standing behind Patriarch Jiang Yun, poked Patriarch Jiang Yun with his finger and transmitted his voice to him. Spirit pills, immortal pills. Patriarch Jiang Yun was taken aback, and then he suddenly came to his senses. He quickly took 2 steps forward and dropped to his knees once again. Ancestral Master, over the years, I was lucky enough to find some decent spirit herbs and a few ancient pill formulas. I've just concocted a cauldron of 7th grade immortal pills, the Calamity Recovery Pill. It's a pity that I only managed to concoct 2 pills. I wonder if they can be of any help to you, Ancestral Master? Carefully, he fished out a flat jade box from under his sleeve, held it over his head, and presented it to Patriarch Yuan Hua. A 7th grade immortal pill? Patriarch Yuan Hua was struck dumb with astonishment. He gave Patriarch Jiang Yun a look, then turned to look at Wu Qi. Nodding, he said with a smile, "If it is really a 7th grade immortal pill, I might be able to fully recover from my injury in a few months. A 7th grade immortal pill is an excellent pill that even 1st-tier heaven immortals treasure. Who would have thought?" After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Yuan Hua grabbed the jade box with his left hand and opened its lid with a shake of his wrist. Inside were 2 immortal pills, each the size of a longan, with countless green mists and golden gleams swirling rapidly inside. They looked like 2 glass pearls. Right after the lid was opened, the 2 immortal pills immediately produced a light swooshing sound, as the surrounding immortal energies kept being sucked into them like streams of water. They are indeed 7th grade spirit pills of the upper grade. Birth Calamity Restoration Pill? I've never heard of this name before. Patriarch Yuan Hua frowned and said in a deep voice, "Jiang Yuner, can I have a look at the pill formulas?" Patriarch Jiang Yun nodded hastily, then took out all the ancient pill formulas Wu Qi gave him in Song Ao Immortal Abode and presented them to Patriarch Yuan Hua. Patriarch Yuan Hua was struck dumb. Then he shook his head and said to Taoist Qi with a smile, "Jiang Yuna, you are a simple and kind person, just as you used to be." Patriarch Yuan Hua took over the pill formulas and gave them a brief glance. Then he was taken aback and cried out in surprise, "They are indeed marvelous. The technique of concocting herbs, the technique of controlling fire, and the various hand incantations are completely different from the technique of alchemy nowadays. They are indeed thought-provoking and marvelous." Patriarch Yuan Hua breathed out a long sigh and returned the pill formulas to Patriarch Jiang Yun. After a brief moment of silence, he smiled and said, "Green Staff, you can officially accept Jiang Yun into the sect. These few pill formulas are more than enough to make Yuan Hua sect dominate the entire Puyo heavenly realm." Patriarch Jiang Yun was struck with wild joy. He kept kowtowing and thanking Patriarch Yuan Hua. Patriarch Yuan Hua smiled as he helped Patriarch Jiang Yun to his feet with one hand. After that, he gave Wu Qi a deep look and said, "You are Wu Qi, right? Very good, very good." After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Yuan Hua waved his left hand. Soundlessly, a pale blue flying sword, as thin as a willow leaf and measuring only 7.2 inches long, flew before Wu Qi. Patriarch Yuan Hua smiled and said, "This is a flying sword I found by accident. Its name is Xuanhao. Take it and protect yourself." The Xuanhao sword was an upper-grade spirit item, and it contained a very strong sentience. It kept twisting and turning in the air like a swimming fish. Wu Qi gladly kowtowed to Patriarch Yuan Hua and thanked him, then took over the Xuanhao sword. Patriarch Yuan Hua nodded and smiled, then flicked his sleeve. Beams of bright light shot out, transforming into a flying sword and a set of defensive outfits hovering before each of the 110 White Cloud Immortal Sect disciples brought here by Patriarch Jiang Yun. Patriarch Yuan Hua said in a deep voice, "Since we are going to have the match with Huiling Sect, the defensive treasures must not be too shabby. All the flying swords are mid-grade spirit items, and all the defensive outfits are lower-grade spirit items. Work hard on them. The match will be held in 1 year and 6 months." One after another, Wu Qi and the others bowed and thanked Patriarch Yuan Hua for the generous gift. Patriarch Yuan Hua smiled pleasantly. He shoved the jade box containing the 2 spirit pills into a secret pocket in front of his chest, then turned to Lord Xianxing and Catfish Flood Dragon and said, "Both of you, come out here and let me have a good look at you. Little boy, are you the Dragon King conferred by the Celestial Court?" Lord Xianxing and Catfish Flood Dragon walked out, then dropped to their knees and bowed to Patriarch Yuan Hua. After that, Lord Xianxing rose to his feet and said respectfully, "My father is the Lord of Longyuan River, which stretches for nearly 100 million miles, and can be considered as one of the major rivers. As for me, I have received an official document from my father, and am now the Lord of a certain ocean." Lord Xianxing fished out the seal that originally belonged to Weining Dragon King and handed it over to Patriarch Yuan Hua respectfully. Patriarch Yuan Hua took the seal and gave it a glance, then smiled pleasantly and said, "You are indeed a legitimate Dragon King conferred by the Celestial Court. Also, judging from the rules of this seal, your clan can be considered as a legitimate dragon with a long history." After returning the seal to Lord Xianxing, Patriarch Yuan Hua said, "It is a great news that a Dragon King conferred by the Celestial Court has become my disciple. Jiang Yun, you are indeed an excellent disciple of Yuan Hua sect." Patriarch Jiang Yun nodded with a smile, not saying a word. Patriarch Yuan Hua turned to look at Catfish Flood Dragon curiously. When he saw the big fish head on her head, he smiled wryly and said, "Don't tell me you can't transform into a human. Your dragon energy and magic power are quite strong. Well, you are a member of the Dragon King's bloodline, and you can be considered as a subordinate of the Celestial Court, even if." When he said that, Patriarch Yuan Hua shut his mouth. Wu Qi could guess what he wanted to say. After all, Catfish Flood Dragon was a subordinate of the Celestial Court. Even if she had an ugly appearance, she was still a subordinate of the Celestial Court. Who would dare to say a word of nonsense? Patriarch Yuan Hua chose a few other disciples from White Cloud Immortal Sect and exchanged a few words with them. Patriarch Yuan Hua's words and actions were like a spring breeze caressing one's face, bringing warmth to one's heart. All the disciples of White Cloud Immortal Sect were very excited, and they could not wait to kill all the disciples chosen by Huiling Sect. Just as everyone was laughing and talking harmoniously, a few streaks of cloud light suddenly approached them at high speed. Taoist Min, who had nearly recovered from the injury on his face, rushed over with a gloomy face. He told Patriarch Yuan Hua in a deep voice, "Master, Reverend Huilin is here." He said that Martial Nephew Green's staff ignored Immortal Monarch's mediation and set up an ambush along the way, wounding that mongrel Kahi. Patriarch Yuan Hua's face darkened instantly. Grinning coldly, he said, "How dare he bully us? My boys, follow me out, and prepare to kill." Patriarch Yuan Hua, who looked like an old grandpa next door a moment ago, suddenly turned into a furious butcher, emanating an astonishing killing intent. Chapter 379. Hovering above Green Cliff Mountain, an old Taoist with one arm and one leg was seen hovering in midair, his face filled with a murderous aura. Missing an arm, this old Taoist priest's left arm and shoulder were chopped off. Missing a leg, this old Taoist priest's right thigh was blown away by the heavenly thunder, and only a small part of the leg bone barely connected his calf to his body. There was also a thin, flat hole in his chest. Obviously, it was caused by a flying sword. The injury was more serious than Patriarch Yuan Hua's. Without a few periods of arduous cultivation, or the use of powerful immortal pills, it would take a long time for him to fully recover. However, the life force of immortals was extremely strong, and the higher the level of an immortal, the stronger their life force would be. According to the legends, as long as the immortal soul of a first-tier heaven immortal did not dissipate, he would be able to live a good life, even if he only had a head left. That was why this old Taoist could still hover arrogantly on Green Cliff Mountain, provoking Yuanhua sect with a stern voice even though he was severely injured. Yuanhua, you old fogey! How could you ignore Immortal Chuan's mediation and send your disciples to ambush my disciples? You've gone too far. The old Taoist, Reverend Huilin, the founding ancestral master of Huiling sect, pointed his finger at Green Cliff Mountain and shouted, "Show yourself! Show yourself now! Today you and I will fight to the death." Following closely behind Patriarch Yuanhua, Wu Qi stepped on a sword beam and shot into the sky. Reverend Huilin was the only disciple from Huiling sect, while on the side of Yuanhua sect, a dozen heaven immortals and over 100 nascent divinity cultivators had already deployed a killing formation with the 6 directions of the southern divinity 6 stars embedded within, trapping Reverend Huilin within. The eye of the formation was Green Cliff Mountain, where 3 heaven immortal elders of Yuanhua sect were sitting cross-legged, guarding 6 pale red flying swords that were wheeling in the sky. Reverend Huilin was trapped by the formation, and Patriarch Yuanhua had arrived before him. But he showed no fear, just proudly clasped his hands behind his back and looked up into the sky. Patriarch Yuanhua could not help but give a cold snort when he saw how calm and composed he looked. "Old fogey Huilin, why are you provoking Yuanhua sect for no reason?" Reverend Huilin glared at Patriarch Yuanhua and said furiously, "You think I'm stirring up trouble for no reason? Your disciple, Green Staff, injured my disciple, Yanhe. You have to give me an explanation." Patriarch Yuanhua rolled his eyes. Without wasting any time, he casually waved his hand into the sky. Immediately, all the clouds within 10,000 miles of him began to rustle and quickly gather towards his palm. In just a blink of an eye, a white thunderball the size of a rice bucket appeared in Patriarch Yuanhua's palm. Without uttering a single word, he threw the thunderball towards Reverend Huilin. Reverend Huilin let out a cold snort as well. His eyes widened, and suddenly, a clear spring appeared in front of him. A lotus quickly sprouted from the spring, and in the blink of an eye, it had become luxuriant with branches and leaves. 3 tender and delicate lotus flowers slowly sprouted from it. The 3 lotus flowers, each about 10 feet in circumference, trembled lightly and firmly blocked the incoming thunderball. With a muffled sound, the surrounding air trembled. The ball of lightning and the lotus were destroyed at the same time. 2 sword cries rang out, as a white sword beam shot out from the top of Patriarch Yuanhua's head, thrusting towards Reverend Huilin's chest. Similarly, a yellow sword beam flew out from behind Reverend Huilin's back, transforming into a cold beam that looked like a great python with scales and claws, thrusting towards Patriarch Yuanhua's flying sword. 2 sword beams collided like 2 mad bulls. They twisted, tangled, stabbed, and scratched each other, and fought fiercely in the air. The jarring noises of friction shook the ears of Wu Qi and the others who were watching the battle from afar, causing them to feel a sharp pain in their ears, forcing them to seal their eardrums. The stalemate lasted for a full 2 hours. Finally, Patriarch Yuanhua's mastery of the sword controlling technique became a notch higher, as he unleashed a thin sword beam diagonally, thrusting towards Reverend Huilin like a lightning bolt. On the other hand, the yellow sword beam unleashed by Reverend Huilin had its glow dimmed, losing its initial power. Seeing that the sword beam was about to pierce through Reverend Huilin's body, Reverend Huilin gave a cold snort, performed an incantation gesture with both hands, and cried out indifferently, "Order! Retreat!" The air in front of him trembled, and a thunderclap rang out. The sword beam was shattered to pieces, turning into countless fireflies in the air. Clang! A loud ringing rang out as Reverend Huilin shattered Patriarch Yuanhua's sword beam. But at the same time, his flying sword had lost all its flame after being twisted by Patriarch Yuanhua's white sword beam, transforming into a dark yellow flying sword with a strange shape as it staggered backward in a sorry state. A dim airflow rushed out from the top of Reverend Huilin's head, catching his flying sword and hiding it inside his body. Meanwhile, Patriarch Yuanhua pointed his finger out, causing the flying sword to shine with a blinding light. Then a 1,000 feet long white beam shot towards Reverend Whalen. Reverend Whalen snorted coldly, then put his hand into his mouth and bit his fingertip. Using his pale golden immortal blood, he drew a fist-sized rune in the air. Wu Qi recognized the rune. It was none other than the word Ah, found in the ancient immortal script, and it possessed an extremely powerful force. As a sonorous incantation rang out, Reverend Whalen shook his wrist, shooting out the golden rune. A loud boom echoed out as the rune exploded, sending a tremendous shockwave that smashed onto Patriarch Yuan Hua's sword beam. The white sword beam dimmed abruptly, as it was knocked tens of miles away by the rune. It swayed and struggled for a while, and could not get up again. Patriarch Yuan Hua's body trembled slightly, and he was forced to take tens of steps back by an invisible force. Both ancestral masters exchanged a glance, then sneered at the same time. Suddenly, all sorts of immortal techniques emerged one after another, and all sorts of flying swords, magical treasures, talismans, and thunder techniques were unleashed at the same time. For a moment, the void was filled with countless blinking lights, and all sorts of thunderclaps that shook the air and made everyone tremble. No one could see where exactly the two ancestral masters were. For experts at the level of Patriarch Yuan Hua and Reverend Whalen, the power of every attack they unleashed was extremely concentrated, and not too much of it would leak out. Therefore, although they were fighting fiercely, it did not affect Wu Qi and his companions at all. At most, they would only feel a strong wind blowing across their faces, but it did not cause any actual harm to them. Both of them fought for a while, and at last, they were both gasping for breath and soaked in sweat. Then they stopped fighting almost at the same time. Separated by a distance of a few miles, both of them stared at each other for a while. Reverend Whalen did not show any intention to flee, and Patriarch Yuan Hua did not order the formation to be activated either. Relying on the advantage of being their home ground, he could make Reverend Whalen stay here. After panting for a while, both of them began to cough violently at the same time. Both of them had yet to recover from their serious injuries. Now that they had suddenly used up all their strength to fight, the immortal energy in their bodies had already been completely depleted. Furthermore, it had also affected their old injuries, which made them even more injured. They had lost a large amount of blood essence and vitality. When they finally managed to catch their breath, Patriarch Yuan Hua pointed his trembling finger at Reverend Whalen and said with a cold grin, "Whalen, you can't tell right from wrong when it comes to arguing. If you want to talk about reason, we'll have a clear answer in the match hosted by Immortal Monarch 1.5 years later." Knowing Ke's character, the Patriarch Yuan Hua snorted coldly and turned his head away. It seemed he did not want to continue arguing about Immortal Kuhi's injury, as he looked down on Immortal Kuhi's character. Reverend Whalen gnashed his teeth and said, "Is Green Staff of Yuan Hua sect a humble and courteous gentleman? To be able to snatch away my senior uncle's dual cultivation partner? Since the beginning of the world, I've never heard of or seen such a thing." Reverend Whalen's words made Taoist Min's eyes turn green with anger. He bared his fangs and brandished his claws, almost wanting to rush forward and fight Reverend Whalen. Meanwhile, Taoist Mo Luan and the few Heaven Immortal elders standing next to him were looking at Wu Qi with hostility, fixing their bright eyes on Immortal Green Staff. Taoist Qi's eyes went wide as he stuck out his chest and roared in a low, muffled voice, "What are you guys trying to do?" Taoist Min panted a few times, clenching his jaws and suppressing the anger and resentment in his heart. With his eyelids drooping, he waved his hand at Taoist Mo Luan and the others. Only then did Taoist Mo Luan and the others slowly bow their heads, not saying another word. Immortal Green Staff tilted his eyes and gave Taoist Mo Luan and the others a glance, then lowered his voice and said, "Take a good look at those few men. They are Mo Luan, Green Peng, Jade Crane, and Shrike. They are the 4 disciples of Uncle Master Min, and all their disciples are named after spirit birds. If you see them in the future, you have to stay away from them. By the same logic, if you see any disciple of theirs whose cultivation base is weaker than yours, feel free to bully them. You have Grand Ancestral Master and I, your Ancestral Master, to back you up." Upon hearing Immortal Greenstaff's words, Wu Qi could not help but twitch his lips. The internal division of Yuanhua sect was so obvious. Were they not afraid that a conflict between their disciples would cause a rift in the sect? Why would Patriarch Yuanhua ignore such a matter? Could it be that he had something to pay attention to? In the distance, Patriarch Yuanhua suddenly roared with laughter and said, "Well done, you old fool Huilin. You are trying to sow discord among our disciples. Sure enough, everyone in Huiling's sect is just a bunch of ordinary people who rely on their 2 lips and 1 tongue to make a living. Hee, the reason you came here today is to avenge your disciples. If you had brought your men here, I would have killed all of them. But, since you came here alone, I really can't bring myself to attack you alone." After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Yuanhua grinned coldly and said, 1.5 years later, when the outcome of the battle between our disciples is determined, you and I will have a one-on-one fight, using our sect as the wager. What do you think? If I lose, Green Cliff Planet will belong to Huiling's sect, and if you lose, you will have to give Huang Qiao Planet to Yuanhua sect as well. Reverend Huilin rolled his eyes and said with a cold grin, "Yuanhua, do you really think you can defeat me?" Patriarch Yuanhua said disapprovingly, "We'll see whether I can defeat you or not when the time comes. Why waste your breath now?" Reverend Huilin rolled his eyes and said with a cold grin, "All right, Immortal Chuan, please be our witness and sign an official document. Using our sect as the wager, I have the same intention as well." A beam of golden light descended from the sky. Clad in a purple robe, Immortal Chuan descended from the sky with a smile on his face, holding a small and exquisite scroll in his hand. He said, "It is the best that both fellow immortals have the same intention. Using our own sect as the wager, such a grand bet is really." TSK. Patriarch Yuanhua was taken aback. Staring at Reverend Huilin, he smiled and said, "So, it seems like you are here for a reason, old fart?" Immortal Chuan nodded and said with a smile, "Patriarch Yuanhua, I've been waiting for you up there for more than half a day." Hee, it is true that Reverend Huilin has asked me to be the witness of the wager in advance. Patriarch Yuanhua and Reverend Huilin exchanged a glance, then burst out laughing at the same time. However, there was no warmth in their laughter. With Immortal Chuan as the witness, Patriarch Yuanhua and Reverend Huilin signed the official document at the same time. 1.5 years later, the disciples of both sects would fight to decide the ownership of the planet with the energy stone vein. 1.5 years later, the ancestral masters of both sects would fight to decide the allegiance of both sections. Promoted by some people with ulterior motives, the news of the wager was immediately spread across Pulyuo Heavenly Realm. Chapter 380. Reverend Huilin must have something to rely on. Otherwise, he would not come here alone and challenge Ancestral Master with such an excuse. Princess Zhang said with a frown as she stood on a cloud, flying gracefully like a heaven immortal. Wu Qi was sitting lazily next to her, flying forward on Princess Zhang Li's cloud. He was also thinking about the same matter. 3 days had passed since Reverend Huilin attacked Green Cliff Planet. During this period, both Wu Qi and Princess Zhang were pondering about the meaning of Reverend Huilin's actions. Obviously, if Immortal Yuanhua had not proposed such a bet, Reverend Huilin would have proposed a bet that was almost the same. However, Patriarch Yuanhua had 2 7th-grade spirit pills to rely on, which would allow him to fully recover his cultivation base in a few months. Reverend Huilin was also severely wounded, and his overall strength had dropped from 28th tier Heaven Immortal to 30th tier. So, what could he rely on to challenge Reverend Huilin? Princess Zhang and Wu Qi were pondering the question with a frown on their faces as they flew forward. After a long moment of pondering, Wu Qi shook his head and said, "Let's not think too much about it. Let's take care of ourselves first. Today, we are going to the Immortal Market on Green Cliff Planet for a stroll. As for the matters of Yuanhua sect, they will be handled by those elders and heaven immortals. What does it have to do with us?" Shaking his head indifferently, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "Even if Yuanhua sect is completely wiped out, it has nothing to do with us." Princess Zhang nodded and gave up on the troublesome question. Her brows smoothed out as she sat happily next to Wu Qi, half of her body poking out of the cloud as she enjoyed the scenery of Green Cliff Planet with a smile on her face. Green Cliff Star was filled with towering mountains and lofty ridges. This was a planet where mountainous terrain occupied most of the landscape. Therefore, the secular countries here were very small, and the cities here were also small and exquisite. Looking down from the sky, one could see that the small, exquisite cities were embedded in the green mountains and clear waters, like bonsai made by expert craftsmen. It was extremely pleasing to the eye. Flying 2,000 miles to the west from Greenwood Peak, where Immortal Greenstaff's cave abode was located, there was an immortal market built by Yuanhua sect. It was also the only place on Green Cliff Planet where immortal cultivators could exchange and trade. Because of Yuanhua sect's reputation and overall strength in Puyo Heavenly Realm, this Green Cliff Immortal Market was very large in scale. Over 100,000 disciples from various immortal sects were stationed here all year round, and over 1 million mortals served them. Wu Qi had brought Princess Zhongli to Green Cliff Immortal Market for a reason. He wanted to try his luck and see if he could find some rare treasures that could be useful to him. Myriad Immortals Planet was very rich in resources, but its production was limited, and it could not contain all the rare treasures found in the entire universe. Therefore, this immortal market was very useful to a cultivator like Wu Qi. Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon were flying a few miles behind them on a dark cloud. They were smart enough not to be the third wheel, but to let Wu Qi and Princess Zhongli enjoy their private space. After flying slowly for nearly an hour, an immortal market surrounded by mountains came into their sight. Along a few majestic green mountains, rows of streets and shops were built one after another. Vaguely, one could see that the streets were bustling with activity, and a large number of cultivators were flying through the air on clouds. The rule of Green Cliff Immortal Market, no, all the immortal markets in the entire universe, was the same: cultivators could only fly on clouds and not on swords. Because the lethality of sword beams was very strong, the sword energy and sword intent it carried might accidentally hurt the mortal servants in the immortal market. On the other hand, flying on clouds did not have such a problem. Unless one deliberately gathered water clouds to summon a thunderstorm, it would not threaten the safety of the immortal market. Wu Qi and his company randomly picked a street and landed. The passers-by gave them a glance as if they were used to it, then went back to their own business. There were thousands of immortal sects in Puyo Heavenly Realm, and each of them had their own shops and trading places. There were more than 100,000 cultivators and disciples stationed here, and the sky was filled with cultivators flying on clouds. The mortals were used to seeing people suddenly landing from the sky. Wu Qi greeted Lord Xiansheng and said, "Big brother, Xian and I will go and find the shops that sell spirit birds and demon pets. You and Catfish Flood Dragon can go shopping." Lord Xiansheng nodded and said to Wu Qi with a smile, "Just go ahead, brother and sister-in-law. I know what to do." He pulled the sleeve of Catfish Flood Dragon, who was looking around, and brought her along the street with saliva dripping from the corner of her mouth. Wu Qi and Princess Zhongli exchanged a glance and smiled. Arm in arm, they strolled slowly down the street. Green Cliff Immortal Market was well equipped, and there were eye-catching road signs on both sides. Following the signs, Wu Qi and Princess Zhongli soon came to the shops that sold all kinds of rare spirit birds and demon beasts as demon pets. For immortal cultivators, their own cultivation base, magic power, divine abilities, mystic techniques, spirit pills, and magical treasures were very important. But the function of demon pets should not be underestimated. A demon beast with a good bloodline and an innate divine ability was of great help to a cultivator. If a cultivator could adopt a good demon pet from a young age and treat it well, he would undoubtedly have a loyal and high-grade fighter. When he was just a little nascent soul cultivator, Reverend Yun, the founding ancestral master of Eminent Cloud Sect, the strongest immortal sect in Puyo Heavenly Realm, had unintentionally adopted a severely wounded little white snake. When he became a heaven immortal, the little white snake had transcended its thunder tribulation and become an immortal as well. When Reverend Yun became a 27th tier heaven immortal, the little white snake grew a pair of wings and transformed into an ancient snake, the snow-armored heaven-devouring python. On top of that, it possessed the overall strength of a 25th-tier heaven immortal. Relying on this snow-armored heaven-devouring python, who treated Reverend Yun as his parent, Eminent Cloud Sect was able to sit firmly on the position of the #1 immortal sect in Pyuyo Heavenly Realm. A snow-armored heaven-devouring python with the overall strength of a 25th-tier heaven immortal was not a match for a dozen immortals like Patriarch Yuan Hua, even if they joined forces. Most of the reason why Eminent Cloud Sect was able to gain the reputation of being the #1 immortal sect in Pyuyo Heavenly Realm was because of this extraordinary python. When Wu Qi refined immortal Xian Yang on Shui Yuan planet, he obtained the bloodline of a fire element divine bird, the phoenix or Luan. He had never used this bloodline, as he wanted to find a good spirit bird for Princess Zhang Li to raise, then fuse the bloodline into the bird's body. With the power of the few ancient pill formulas in Wu Qi's hand, he could concoct some spirit herbs that could stimulate the bloodline, turning the spirit bird into an innate divine bird. Although Princess Zhang Li's cultivation base was progressing at an incredible speed, the world of cultivators was a dangerous place, and people's hearts were unpredictable. As a result, Wu Qi was worried about Princess Zhang Li's safety. Only with the protection of a divine bird could Wu Qi feel at ease. After strolling along the street for a while, Wu Qi chose a demon pet shop named Flapping Feather Pavilion, then brought Princess Zhang Lu into the shop. Upon entering the pavilion, they were immediately greeted by the chirping of countless birds. On the other side, Princess Zhang Li gave a loud cry. Happily, she came before a few bird cages made from gold-threaded Phoebe wood and whistled softly, teasing a few nestlings who were huddled together in the cages and had yet to open their eyes. The shopkeeper of the shop, a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s and only had a cultivation base of early-stage Jin Dan, came forward to greet them attentively. His gaze swept across the waist medallions of Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Lu, which indicated that they were disciples of Glorious Cloud Sect. Then he bowed respectfully and said, "Seniors, may I know what you would like to choose?" Princess Zhang Li tilted her head, completely ignoring the shopkeeper. With a smile on her face, she reached out her fingers through the gaps between the cages and gently stroked the few baby birds that were huddled together. She gently whistled, and the pleasant sound of the whistle made the tens of thousands of baby birds and adult demon birds in nearly 1,000 bird cages of various sizes in the Flapping Feather Pavilion shop, which was nearly 1,000 feet in circumference, let out crisp chirps at the same time. With both hands clasped behind his back, Wu Qi looked at the shopkeeper and said in a straightforward manner, "For fire elemental demon birds, the purer and higher the grade of their bloodline, the better. It is best if they are baby birds or eggs. Adult ones. I don't want them." It was extremely difficult to tame an adult demon bird, and Wu Qi did not want to waste his time on it. With the bloodline of an innate divine bird, Wu Qi could easily make the baby bird grow at a very fast speed. So, why should he waste his time on it? The baby bird that was raised from a very young age would have feelings for Princess Zhang Lu, just like a parent. A demon pet like this would be the most loyal. Wu Qi's words startled the shopkeeper, then he hurriedly bowed and said, "You're an expert, please come this way. We happen to have a flaming feathers sparrow that had just hatched 2 days ago. It's a true fire elemental spirit bird. Among all the 9th grade spirit birds, it's very rare for a flaming feathers sparrow to be ranked in the 3rd grade. Wu Qi followed the shopkeeper and came to a birdcage made from fire elemental energy stones located in the middle of the shop. A chubby baby bird, about the size of a hen and covered in fine red feathers, was seen curling up in a nest made from a few pieces of mid-grade fire elemental energy stones, squinting its eyes and chirping. Using the mystic eyes of universe, Wu Qi gave the baby bird a glance. It was indeed a fire elemental spirit bird, and its bloodline was not bad. It had a very faint bloodline of the lower-grade immortal bird, Brahma red sparrow. With such a spirit bird with the bloodline of an immortal bird, it was much easier for Wu Qi to fuse with the bloodline in his hand. Without bargaining, Wu Qi took out his storage bag and paid 500,000 lower-grade energy stones for the flaming feathers sparrow. Then, he paid an additional 100,000 lower-grade energy stones for a spirit breeding ring, which only had the internal space of a house. Only now did Wu Qi realize that Pueyuo Heavenly Realm was actually very poor. There were 10,000 longbow men squatting in his spirit-breeding ring, and the ordinary spirit-breeding ring here only had the internal space of a house. Fortunately, before he left Myriad Immortals' planet, he had plundered a great amount of natural treasures from the Great Eastern Ocean, which allowed him to expand the spirit-breeding ring to his heart's content. Otherwise, Wu Qi was really worried that the flaming feather sparrow would suffer in such a small space. Right after the transaction was completed, Wu Qi shoved the flaming feather sparrow into the spirit-breeding ring he bought. All of a sudden, he heard a commotion coming from outside. Good heavens! She swallowed it without making a sound. That fish-headed demon is so fierce. How dare she swallow a living man in the street? Looks like we have a good show to watch. The man she swallowed is the grandnephew of the chief elder of Eminent Cloud Sect's Luo Spirit Palace. A fish-headed demon swallowed a human? The human she swallowed was someone from Eminent Cloud Sect? Wu Qi felt dizzy. Without hesitation, he grabbed Princess Zhonglu and ran out of the shop. Chapter 381. 3 streets away from Flapping Feather Pavilion, Catfish Flood Dragon and Lord Xianxing were surrounded by a crowd in front of a 9-storied pavilion that was nearly 1,000 feet wide, with each story being 90 feet tall. Countless onlookers were pointing their fingers and talking, whispering to those who came from behind, describing how Catfish Flood Dragon opened her mouth and swallowed Yun Wuqi, the disciple of Eminent Cloud Sect who was stationed on Green Cliff Planet. Yun Wuqi, an early-stage nascent soul cultivator, was swallowed alive by Catfish Flood Dragon without being able to put up any resistance. In the eyes of the onlookers, Catfish Flood Dragon was simply a ferocious great demon, an evildoer who came out of nowhere to stir up trouble. And on top of that, there was a medallion of Yunhua Sect's disciple hanging on her belt, which surprised all the onlookers. When Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu arrived, nearly 100 cultivators, whose cultivation base ranged from early-stage nascent divinity realm to peak-stage Xiantian realm, were surrounding Lord Xianxing and Catfish Flood Dragon with their swords drawn. The only early-stage nascent divinity cultivator was gnashing his teeth and roaring furiously with bloodshot eyes. I don't care who you are, you've killed young Master Yun, and that's a capital crime. 10,000 deaths are not enough to atone for your great crime. Lord Xianxing's face was gloomy, and he did not say a word. He spread his arms and shielded the pair of tiny girls who were shivering behind him. Catfish Flood Dragon was shaking her big head, giggling at the early-stage nascent divinity disciple from Eminent Cloud Sect and said, I didn't kill him, I ate him. Blood must be shed when killing someone, but I didn't see any blood when eating someone. So, I didn't kill him, I ate him. Catfish Flood Dragon opened her mouth and clasped her hands behind her back as she said, That young master of yours is not a good man. Not only did he steal the spirit herb from the little girl, he even wanted to use her as a cultivation vessel. I don't think I'm a fool. What good would it be to use a little girl as a cultivation vessel? She would still be turned into a dried corpse after a few days of torment. That's not going to work. She lightly patted the 2 girls, who were shivering and hiding behind Lord Xianxing, and said smilingly, Look, how could such a good little girl be harmed by that rascal young master of yours? Wu Qi pushed the crowd aside violently and happened to hear Catfish Flood Dragon's words. Abruptly, those onlookers were pushed aside by Wu Qi. A few angry Jin Dan cultivators opened their mouths and cursed, Where did this stupid bird come from? Why are you pushing me? These few human immortals of Jin Dan were cursing viciously. Wu Qi glared at them, but before he could say anything, Princess Zhonglu had already picked up a burly man and gave him a series of slaps. After that, Princess Zhonglu casually tossed him to the side, using a forbidden technique she inherited from her mother's bloodline, throwing him tens of miles away. Lightly clapping her hands, Princess Zhonglu rolled her eyes and snorted coldly, Who else is not convinced? This empress can convince him wholeheartedly. A 5-colored auspicious gleam could be seen wheeling faintly in her eyes. A tremendous spiritual pressure was exerted on all the onlookers, making them bow their heads and not dare to make a sound. Wu Qi gave Princess Zhonglu a thumbs up and praised, "Well done." Princess Zhonglu smiled sweetly. She pulled out a white silk handkerchief and wiped her hands, then threw it to the ground. After that, she followed Wu Qi and walked into the crowd, standing next to Catfish Flood Dragon. Wu Qi gave the surrounding disciples of Eminent Cloud Sect a glance and said coldly, "What is going on? What is Eminent Cloud Sect, Luo Ling Pavilion trying to do? Are you trying to kill a disciple of Yuan Hua Sect?" The early-stage nascent divinity cultivator from Eminent Cloud Sect cried out sternly, "Junior, your disciple has killed young Master Yun. You." With a blink, a shadow darted out from behind Wu Qi's back. It was a celestial fiend puppet that shot out and gave the early-stage nascent divinity cultivator a fierce slap on the face. Slap. Half of the cultivator's face was smashed, and he fell heavily to the ground while howling miserably. Nascent divinity puppets were precious treasures created by ancient almighty experts, used to guard the sect. After being painstakingly trained by Wu Qi, these puppets had cultivated the celestial fiend battle the heaven script to the peak stage of nascent soul realm, which was equal to Wu Qi's false nascent realm. On top of that, they were nourished by the innate earth element energy essence, and had devoured countless rare metals and materials in Great Yen Dynasty's secret vault. As a result, their fleshly body was at least 100 times stronger than Wu Qi's, which was strengthened by the dark Yin true water, let alone an ordinary early-stage nascent divinity cultivator. The slap was like smashing a piece of tofu with an iron hammer. Of course, the iron hammer would be fine, but the tofu would be smashed into pieces. The nascent divinity cultivator, whose face was smashed and smashed, pointed his finger at Wu Qi and cried out with a trembling voice, How dare you?" Wu Qi stared coldly at the nascent divinity cultivator. With a thought in his mind, the celestial fiend puppet suddenly dashed out, grabbed the nascent divinity cultivator's neck, and twisted it into a dough twist. A bloody nascent divinity flew up into the sky while howling miserably. Suddenly, a large tongue came rolling over from the side. Catfish Flood Dragon stuck out the tongue and pulled the cultivator's nascent divinity into her mouth, then swallowed it back into her stomach. Patting her belly, Catfish Flood Dragon said with a silly voice, "Not bad, the taste is not bad. It tastes better than that Yun Wuqi who had his body emptied." After allowing Catfish Flood Dragon to swallow a nascent divinity cultivator from Eminent Cloud Sect in front of so many people, Wuqi squeezed out a smile. With hands clasped behind his back, he turned to look at those Eminent Cloud Sect cultivators, who were dumbfounded and trembling with fear, and said, "Actually, what I want to say is that this is a misunderstanding." A nascent divinity cultivator from Eminent Cloud Sect sprung to his feet and roared furiously, "It is not a misunderstanding." Another celestial fiend puppet sprung out from behind Wu Qi's back. Like a lightning bolt, it came before the nascent divinity cultivator, punched through his heart, and pulled out his nascent soul. Catfish Flood Dragon did not hesitate, and swallowed the nascent soul into her stomach as well. With a smile on his face, Wu Qi nodded and said, "I've told you, this is a fucking misunderstanding." A cold gleam flashed in Wu Qi's eyes as he said in a cold voice, "I've told you, this is a misunderstanding. Does anyone have any other opinion?" With a twitch of his finger, 100 Jin Dan grade longbow men rushed out from the spirit breeding ring, roaring furiously as they strode towards the surrounding streets and completely sealed off the entire street. One after another, shadows flashed out from behind Wu Qi's back, followed by the rest of the celestial fiend puppets. They transformed into Taoists with different appearances, riding on clouds and patrolling in the sky. Wu Qi spread his divine will and enveloped the nearby streets in a flash, keeping track of everyone's every move. A bright gleam flickered in Princess Zhongli's eyes as she began to recite an incantation under her breath. Immediately, a vast dark mist rose from the ground, and countless faintly discernible ghosts soared into the sky with shrill cries, completely surrounding the nearby streets. The people from Eminent Cloud Sect and Luo Ling Pavilion were struck dumb. They stared in horror at Wu Qi, who had sealed off the entire street, and cried out sternly, What are you trying to do?" This is Green Cliff Immortal Market. What? What are you trying to do? There are so many fellow Taoists here, and they won't let you go. Wu Qi snorted coldly, shook his head helplessly and said with a sigh, there are always some rascals under the heaven. They did some rascals, and in the end, they were killed by someone, and then they provoked even more rascals. My friend has eaten your young master Yun, and Eminent Cloud Sect will definitely not let this go. What else can I do? Eminent Cloud Sect, I really don't have the strength to fight against them now. A chill ran down the spines of the surrounding cultivators. They suddenly began to regret why they came so quickly to watch the show. What was Wu Qi trying to do by sealing off the entire street? Was he trying to silence them? But this was Green Cliff Immortal Market, and he could not possibly kill all the witnesses. Unless he bathed Green Cliff Immortal Market in blood and killed everyone, he would never be able to escape from the revenge of Eminent Cloud Sect. Wu Qi bowed his head and pondered for a brief moment. Then he fished out a large amount of writing brush, ink, paper, and inkstone from Black Dragon's spirit ring. Those who do not want to die, he said with a deep voice, write down everything that happened, including how Yun Wuqi bullied the innocent, and how Catfish Flood Dragon tried to protect the victim, but was forced to defend herself by Yun Wuqi. I'll recite it verbally, and you will write it down. If you make a single mistake, I'll kill you. All the surrounding cultivators rolled their eyes at the same time. If you recite it verbally, we will write it down. Doesn't that mean whatever you say will happen? Suddenly, a Eminent Cloud Sect's disciple from Luo Ling Pavilion cried out, everyone, run in different directions. Before his words could fade away, with a thought from Wu Qi, a tremendous magnetic force rushed whistling out from under the ground and tightly trapped the disciple's body. A tremendous pressure that was over 1,000 times stronger than the initial stage Jin Dan cultivator could only let out a miserable howl as his body collapsed abruptly, turning into a meat patty that spread out on the ground. Blood splattered in all directions, as his Jin Dan was crushed into a thin piece of meat patty by the tremendous magnetic force. Wu Qi looked at these Eminent Cloud Sect's disciples with a gentle expression, smiled, and said, your great young master Yun has robbed the spirit herbs and abducted innocent girls. You are just a bunch of rascals who help the evildoer do evil. I've killed all of you, and I don't feel guilty at all. Either you write down the details of what happened according to what I told you, or all of you will die here. All the cultivators of Luo Ling Pavilion looked at each other. While they were still in a daze, Wu Qi moved his fingertip and unleashed another sword beam, chopping off the heads of 3 peak stage Xiantian cultivators. Blood sprayed out from their necks and sprayed into the air. No one dared to say another word. Nearly 1,000 cultivators lay flat on their stomachs on the ground, holding brush and ink in their hands. Following Wu Qi's words, they began to write down the details of what happened, stroke by stroke. According to Wu Qi's description, Yun Wuqi had robbed the spirit herbs and abducted innocent girls. He was truly an unforgivable villain. When he was killed, all the onlookers applauded and cheered loudly. It was especially true for those Eminent Cloud Sect's disciples from Luo Ling Pavilion. Under Wu Qi's coercion, they wrote down all the similar filthy deeds that Yun Wuqi had done in the past in great detail. On the other side, Princess Zhonglu was holding a pair of twin girls who looked to be in their early teens and comforting them with kind words. She pulled out a handkerchief and wiped the cheeks of the 2 girls. They were a pair of beautiful, adorable, and lively girls with a pair of dewy pearls. Their cultivation base was very shallow, roughly at the level of Qi refining realm. Their little hands were covered with calluses and wounds, which were obviously the marks of climbing over cliffs in the forest while grabbing wild grasses and vines. Wu Qi looked at the 2 young girls, who were too frightened to move, holding Princess Zhongli's little hands. He threw his head back and roared furiously into the sky, Yun Wuqi, you are not a fucking human. How could you harm a little girl like this? A deranged scum like you should have been killed long ago. Wu Qi's roar was filled with righteousness and righteousness. On the other hand, those cultivators who were writing their testimonies on the ground nearly burst into tears. If Wu Qi used their testimonies as evidence and stamped them with a bloody handprint, he would have completely offended Eminent Cloud Sect. Right when these cultivators were about to cry and wish they could commit suicide, several hundred sword beams came shooting over from a distance. Taoist White Sparrow's voice rang out from afar. "Who dares to stir up trouble in Greencliff Immortal Market?" A few muffled snorts rang out as the longbow men Wu Qi sent outside were forced back by the sword beams. Their leader, Long Yuan, was covered in blood from the sword beams. Wu Qi's face turned cold. With a wave of his hand, over 1,000 testimonies fell into his palm. Chapter 382. White Sparrow was in an extremely bad mood. Not to mention the old grudge between him and Patriarch Jiang Yun from 100,000 years ago. After all, it involved the face of his patriarch. If he brought it up again and again, it would be like slapping his patriarch in the face. That would make Priest Min hold a grudge against him. But this time, there were new and old grudges. Taoist White Sparrow still remembered that when he left Yuan Hua sect, he had a cultivation base of peak-stage nascent divinity realm, just like Patriarch Jiang Yun. After losing the care of his sect, he wandered around the world alone. It was not easy for him to come across an immortal fortuitous encounter and obtained 2 immortal artifacts left behind by ancient immortals. He successfully overcame the lightning tribulation and became a heavenly immortal. After that, he founded his own sect and became the master of a sect. After 100,000 years of hard work, he had trained a group of elite disciples and dominated a remote small planet. His days were very comfortable. Then his master, Mo Wan, suddenly came to him and told him that Yuan Hua sect and Huiling sect had agreed on a life and death match. It was a great opportunity for him to earn some merits. White Sparrow immediately led 110 carefully selected disciples and followed Mo Wan to the Green Cliff planet. He had originally hoped to make a great contribution so that he could return to the sect smoothly and receive the teachings of the Returning in Action scripture. However, that damned enemy, Patriarch Jiang Yun, had brought 100 peak-stage nascent soul realm experts and 10 peak-stage nascent divinity realm experts with him. On the other hand, he only had 3 to 5 peak-stage nascent divinity disciples and over 70 peak-stage nascent soul disciples. However, compared to Patriarch Jiang Yun, the gap between their overall strength was too huge, and his own cultivation base was not as strong as Patriarch Jiang Yun. Therefore, the opportunity to represent Yuan Hua sect in the match was given to Patriarch Jiang Yun. Although Bai Ke was also an outer sect elder like Patriarch Jiang Yun, Patriarch Jiang Yun was able to lead his disciples to perform meritorious deeds and receive rewards, while Bai Ke was sent to Green Cliff Immortal Market to be a manager. Of course, this was a very lucrative position. If it wasn't for his master's care, Bai Ke wouldn't have had the chance to become the managing elder of Green Cliff Immortal Market. He was furious no matter how he thought about it. Jiang Yun was going to perform meritorious deeds and be rewarded, while he was squatting here dealing with a bunch of cultivators. For the past 3 days, Bai Ke had been in a terrible mood. Therefore, when he heard that there was a fish-headed demon eating people in the street, he immediately thought of Patriarch Jiang Yun's disciple, the catfish flood dragon. What kind of demon dared to stir up trouble on Green Cliff Planet? The native fiendish demons of Green Cliff Planet had all been killed in the past millions of years. Which fiendish demon would dare to cause trouble in Green Cliff Immortal Market? It must be that disciple of Patriarch Jiang Yun. Jiang Yun, you've hit the edge of a knife. With a complacent, ferocious smile on his face, White Sparrow excitedly summoned all the disciples he brought to Green Cliff Planet. Together with several hundred Yuan Hua sect disciples who were stationed in Green Cliff Immortal Market, they stepped on their flying swords and rushed towards the scene of the incident. When he was still 2 to 3 miles away from the Luo Ling Pavilion, a few tall and sturdy men, who were more than 30 feet tall, suddenly rushed out from the street below, holding lightning bolts in their hands and striking down at his head. No matter what, White Sparrow had the cultivation base of a heaven immortal. Facing the thunderous attack from the longbow men, he only gave a cold laugh and casually thrust out a sword beam, shattering the thunderbolts. The sword beam whistled through the air, and Long Yuan and his companions were knocked flying backward in a sorry state, with blood spraying out of their bodies. White Sparrow was surprised that his sword beam failed to kill Long Yuan and his companions, who only had the cultivation base of Jin Dan. His mood immediately turned worse. He gave a furious roar and thrust out his sword beam, intending to behead Long Yuan and his companions. But suddenly, a white light came sweeping over from behind, and Long Yuan and the other burly men suddenly disappeared without a trace. A middle-aged Taoist, clad in a green Taoist robe, his face expressionless and his facial features ordinary, stood before White Sparrow and blocked his way. "My master is dealing with some private affairs. Stop right there." The green-clothed Taoist was none other than one of Wu Qi's celestial fiend puppets. He stood before White Sparrow with a cold and lifeless expression. The puppet pointed his right hand out at a slanted angle, and a 3-feet-long, bronze, ancient-looking sword hovered a few feet in front of his fingertip. Its sharp edge was gleaming with a hazy gleam under the sunlight. White Sparrow gave the puppet a cold glance. How could a mere peak-stage nascent soul cultivator be so presumptuous in front of him? He even disdained to attack the puppet. "Kill him!" he cried out sternly, then pointed his finger at the puppet. An early-stage nascent divinity cultivator standing behind White Sparrow snorted coldly. Disdainfully, he waved his hand and unleashed a spinning beam of water beam. The crescent-shaped beam of water beam tore through the air with an ear-splitting whistling noise, hitting accurately on the puppet's chest. However, the puppet did not budge even a little bit, despite sending out a large number of sparks. White Sparrow and the group of disciples were taken aback. But, before they could cry out, the puppet's body flashed and came before the nascent divinity cultivator. The puppet stretched out his left arm and grabbed the neck of the dumbfounded early-stage nascent divinity cultivator, then casually squeezed and crushed his neck as if he was pinching a chicken. Before the cultivator's nascent divinity could escape from his body, the puppet swung his right arm and thrust the sword beam into the cultivator's forehead, piercing through his spiritual ocean and stabbing into his nascent divinity. A dark green gleam emerged in the cultivator's spiritual ocean, sucking his nascent divinity and all his blood essence into the puppet's body. After being replenished by the early-stage nascent divinity cultivator's blood essence and nascent divinity, the puppet's ferocious aura rose to a higher level. Vaguely, it showed a sign of breaking through peak-stage nascent soul realm and stepping into nascent divinity realm. He let out a long cry and shook his left arm, shooting out another ancient-looking green flying sword. Then he controlled the two flying swords with both hands, and his body began to spin rapidly. Amidst a series of hissing noises, like a huge wheel made of blades, the puppet plunged into the crowd of White Sparrow's disciples, leaving behind a large sheet of cold gleam. The sound of blades cutting bodies kept echoing out, while miserable howls towered into the sky. In just a blink of an eye, a dozen of White Sparrow's disciples had their arms and legs chopped off, while howling and retreating hastily. White Sparrow's body was trembling with rage. He roared furiously and did not have the time to rush to the scene to investigate the incident of the fish-headed demon eating humans. Instead, a colorful cloud soared up into the sky from the top of his head, amidst which came a strangely shaped banner pieced together with countless bone-shaped jade slips. As the banner fluttered, the surrounding void trembled, and the eyes of all the cultivators who were hovering in midair to watch the show suddenly turned dark. Their souls were thrown into confusion, and they fell backward to the ground. Like dumplings falling into a pot, several thousand cultivators fell to the ground with their arms and legs broken. Some had their arms and legs broken, while some were unlucky enough to have their necks broken. Although the injuries were not fatal, they did not feel good at all. The banner was one of the two immortal items White Sparrow was lucky enough to obtain, the Jade Bones soul-searching banner. As long as it was a creature with a soul, once it was fluttered, its soul would be shaken, and no matter how profound the creature's cultivation base was, it would still make him dizzy. If it was a cultivator whose cultivation base was not as strong as Taoist White Sparrow, it would capture every single one of them, and no one could escape from it. However, the celestial fiend puppet just gave the banner a glance as if nothing had happened, then stretched out his hand and grabbed towards the Jade Bones soul-searching banner. Clang! The celestial fiend puppet grabbed the long handle of the Jade Bones soul-searching banner, which was carved out of a dark green jade and shaped like a spine. Then, he activated the celestial fiend Battle the Heaven script. A bizarre force that came with a very strong and murderous aura of fiend, as well as a very strong primitive aura, filled the puppet's body. Abruptly, his strength grew to a frightening level. With a grab and a shake, a large sheet of bright light shone from the Jade Bone's soul-searching banner, which was about to break away from the colorful cloud transformed from White Sparrow's immortal soul, and was nearly snatched away by the celestial fiend puppet. White Sparrow cried out in shock. A cloud rose from the top of his head, and without any hesitation he transformed his immortal soul into a dense cloud and rushed out, wrapping the Jade Bone's soul-searching banner tightly. The long banner was a treasure left behind by an ancient immortal, and its grade was very high. White Sparrow did not have the chance to truly refine it, but by relying on the fact that he had been living with it for 100,000 years, he had reached a tacit understanding with the sleeping item spirit in it, allowing him to borrow a tiny bit of its insignificant power. If the celestial fiend puppet snatched it away, the sleeping item spirit in the banner would never come back to find Taoist White Sparrow after traveling for thousands of miles. Damned evildoer! Let go of me! White Sparrow opened his mouth and shot out a large sheet of bright light. A strange-shaped wheel, about 3 feet in diameter and shaped like a wheel, with its edges densely packed with razor-sharp blades, shot out. For a moment, the sky was filled with countless white blades that shot in all directions. The countless blades transformed into a tornado that stood 100 miles tall and 1,000 feet wide, wrapping around the celestial fiend puppet. Loud clanging noises rang out as countless sparks burst out from the puppet's body, while countless deep and shallow cuts were left on its body by the wheel. But, no matter how the wheel sliced and sliced, after flying several hundred feet away, those body parts would immediately turn into liquid droplets that looked like mercury, then quickly flew back to the puppet and fused back into its body. The puppet let out an unpleasant laughter, while green ghost flames burst out from its eyes, stretching nearly 10 feet away as it stared at White Sparrow, baring its teeth and staring at him. Wu Qi, who was collecting the confessions, laughed with surprise. After absorbing countless strange metals from Great Yen Dynasty's secret vault, the power of these celestial fiend puppets had gone beyond his expectation. Not only did they possess the cultivation base of peak-stage nascent soul realm, but the strength of their fleshly body could actually withstand the attack of an immortal item? The ancient almighty experts who crafted these celestial fiend puppets were indeed extraordinary, and they truly deserve to be the extraordinary treasures used to safeguard the fate of their sex. Grinning coldly, the 17 celestial fiend puppets stationed in the 4 directions shot toward White Sparrow at the same time, leaving numerous afterimages in the air. Sword beams pierced through the air, while fist winds shook and shook the void. The sudden attack of 18 celestial fiend puppets had caught White Sparrow unprepared. Hastily, he produced a small purple-gold pagoda and unleashed a light barrier to protect himself. However, as he was only focused on defending, 3 of the celestial fiend puppets grabbed the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, and together with the first puppet, they pulled the flag up and broke free from the control of White Sparrow's immortal soul. The strength of these celestial fiend puppets could uproot mountains, and they possessed an immense divine strength. How could White Sparrow resist their tremendous strength with the power of his immortal soul? Amidst jarring and strange howls, the 18 celestial fiend puppets suddenly merged together, transforming into a blurry green figure that shot out and disappeared in just a blink of an eye. The Jade Bone's soul-searching flag was taken away by the puppets, and White Sparrow could no longer sense its existence. Taoist White Sparrow threw his head back and roared furiously, jumping and leaping madly in the sky. His heart was convulsing and cramping, and he nearly burst into tears because of the heartache. Years ago, it was with the help of the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag that he managed to transcend his heaven immortal thunder tribulation. He knew very well that the flag had an immense power, and it was not an ordinary immortal item. But now, it was forcibly taken away by someone. On top of that, it was a group of freaks with the cultivation base of peak-stage nascent soul realm. Taoist White Sparrow let out a long cry. While he was about to teleport away and chase after the celestial fiend puppets, Wu Qi came shooting over and stood in front of him. Wu Qi grabbed White Sparrow's sleeve and roared, "Uncle Master, you have to uphold justice for me. Those people from Eminent Cloud sect have abused their power to bully others and dominate the market. They must be severely punished. You have to be our witness. We were forced to defend ourselves, and that's why we killed those people from Eminent Cloud sect." Taoist White Sparrow was so angry that his vision turned dark. "You actually killed those people from Eminent Cloud sect?" Chapter 383. On the 9th floor of Green Cliff Immortal Market, Eminent Cloud sect's Luo Ling Pavilion. The furnishings in this place were elegant and dignified. A few low shelves made of spirit jade were placed on top of them, on which were placed a dozen treasures that looked rather crude and inconspicuous at first glance. These treasures were all protected by talismans, and even the weakest one was a lower-grade spirit item. Placed right in the middle of the room was a 3 feet and 6 inches long red damask silk, which was protected by numerous restrictive talismans and talismans. It was even a lower-grade immortal item. Sitting upright on a large chair in Luo Ling Pavilion, Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and glanced around. Eminent Cloud sect was indeed worthy of being the #1 sect in Puyo Heavenly Realm, as they could actually sell lower-grade immortal items in their shops. And this was under the circumstance that the resources in Puyo Heavenly Realm were far less abundant than those in Myriad Immortals Planet. Despite that, they were still able to display lower-grade immortal items on their counters. At the very least, it meant that Eminent Cloud sect was able to gather a great amount of precious materials to craft immortal items, and they must have a Grandmaster Craftsman, or else they would not be able to craft qualified immortal items. Some itinerant heaven immortals in Puyo Heavenly Realm who did not have any powerful backers were still using ordinary spirit items. Not every heaven immortal could own an immortal item. In the spacious parlor on the 9th floor of Luo Ling Pavilion, Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu were sitting side by side. Opposite them were a few executing disciples of Luo Ling Pavilion with unsightly faces. However, they were all frightened by Wu Qi's brutal and violent means, and dared not to look into Wu Qi's eyes. Taoist White Sparrow, whose face was very unsightly, alternating between pale, green, and red, was sitting on the upper hand of Wu Qi, whose face was very unsightly. His most important treasure, the Jade Bones soul-searching flag, was snatched away by those celestial fiend puppets. His mind was in a mess, and he had long lost his composure. His mind was blank, and he did not know what to do next. He could not figure out why the Jade Bones soul-searching flag could not deal with those few celestial fiend puppets. Wu Qi stole a glance at White Sparrow. Of course, he would not tell White Sparrow that celestial fiend puppets were just puppets, and did not have their own souls. So, how could they be restrained by the Jade Bones soul-searching flag? He was laughing in his mind. According to the information given to him by the puppets, the Jade Bones soul-searching flag was an incredible immortal item, and Wu Qi had obtained another powerful treasure. However, Wu Qi was a little worried at the same time. Just now, many people in the neighborhood saw the scene of celestial fiend puppets rushing out from his body. I hope no one is stupid enough to tell White Sparrow about this, or else, don't blame me for killing them. Perhaps, it would not be a bad idea to kill White Sparrow, as he had just fused his 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls with his innate gold cores of 5 elements, and was preparing to break through this realm with the help of a vast amount of immortal energy, forming his innate nascent soul of 5 elements. Subconsciously, he touched the Black Dragon Spirit Ring, which was now filled with several tens of thousands of kilograms of drunken dragon incense. He did not have to worry about a 36th tier heaven immortal like White Sparrow. As long as he did not let Emol know the cause and effect of the matter, Wu Qi was not afraid of them. A little further up, Patriarch Jiang Yun was sitting right next to White Sparrow with a straight face, while Green Staff and Emol, the pair of old foes, were sitting right above them, followed by Taoist Min and Taoist Qi, who were staring at each other. Patriarch Yuan Hua was seen sitting cross-legged calmly on a bed in the middle of the room, with a few elders with the cultivation base of heaven immortals standing around him. After a moment of silence, Patriarch Yuan Hua asked in a deep voice, "Where are the fellow Taoists from Luo Ling Pavilion?" A eminent cloud sect's disciple rose to his feet, his body trembling. He pointed at Wu Qi and stammered, All of them were killed by this fellow Taoist. The chief supervisor of Luo Ling Pavilion, Uncle Master Yun Wuqi, and the chief manager, Uncle Master Fan Qi, were killed by this fellow Taoist. Patriarch Yuan Hua sighed faintly, then nodded and said, "Fellow Taoist Fan Qi has a cultivation base of early-stage nascent divinity realm. Wu Qi, your cultivation base is only at peak-stage nascent soul realm, isn't it?" The gap between nascent divinity realm and nascent soul realm is like the gap between an adult and a baby. How did you kill him? After a brief moment of silence, Wu Qi rose to his feet and transmitted his voice to Patriarch Yuan Hua and all the seniors of Yuan Hua sect. "I had a fortuitous encounter, and my fleshly body was once tempered by the heavenly Yin true water. Although my cultivation base is only at nascent soul realm, my energy, magic power, and the strength of my fleshly body are comparable to peak-stage nascent divinity cultivators." For the first time, Wu Qi made a comprehensive evaluation of his overall strength. If he did not rely on all kinds of bizarre divine abilities and mystic techniques, powerful magical treasures and immortal items, and even some evil tricks like drunken dragon incense, judging purely from the strength of his energy and fleshly body, he was truly equal to a peak-stage nascent divinity cultivator. Another name for peak-stage nascent divinity cultivators was half-immortal. That was to say, a peak-stage nascent divinity cultivator was no different from a 36th tier heaven immortal, except that he lacked the thunder tribulation to transform his energy into immortal energy. Patriarch Yuan Hua stared at Wu Qi in shock, while Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others turned to look at him in horror. Wu Qi touched the black dragon spirit ring with his finger, and a 3-feet-tall white jade bottle appeared in his palm. This was the advantage of the black dragon spirit ring. As long as there was something in the ring, the black dragon soul could fill and store it according to Wu Qi's will. Just now, the black dragon soul took out several tens of kilograms of heavenly Yin true water from the spirit bottle, pouring it into the 3-feet-tall white jade bottle. The heavenly Yin true water was transformed from the ice element energy stones that Wu Qi stored in the bottle during the past few days. Each drop of the heavenly Yin true water was heavier than mercury, and shone brightly and dazzlingly. Right after Wu Qi took out the white jade bottle, the temperature in the room dropped by a large margin. Respectfully, he handed the white jade bottle to Patriarch Yuan Hua, then Wu Qi said through voice transmission, "I still have some heavenly Yin true water left, and I hereby present it to Ancestral Master. With it, Ancestral Master can temper your immortal body. When you fight Reverend Huilin in the future, Ancestral Master will have a greater chance of winning." When he handed the white jade bottle to Patriarch Yuan Hua, Wu Qi stared at it without blinking, his eyes filled with reluctance to part with it. Patriarch Yuan Hua received the white jade bottle, and his heart was filled with wild joy. Tempering one's body with heavenly Yin true water could make one's fleshly body stronger, more flexible, and able to contain more and purer immortal energy. Once all the several tens of kilograms of heavenly Yin true water were absorbed by his fleshly body, Patriarch Yuan Hua was confident that he could elevate his overall strength by 1 or 2 tiers. Although his cultivation base would not improve, his actual combat strength would definitely be equivalent to a 26th tier heaven immortal. With the immortal pills that could heal wounds, and the heavenly Yin true water that could temper one's body, Reverend Huilin would be nothing to him. Patriarch Yuan Hua happily shoved the white jade bottle into his storage ring. He noticed the reluctance in Wu Qi's eyes. Instantly, he felt guilty and ashamed. As an old man and an ancestral master, he still had to rob something from his juniors? After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Yuan Hua smiled at Immortal Greenstaff and said, "From tomorrow onwards, I'll teach Wu Qi, Zixian, Xianxing, and Siyu the scripture of unity of inaction. Jiang Yun, listen to me as well. You are only one step away from 35th tier heaven immortal realm." Upon hearing Patriarch Yuan Hua's words, Wu Qi was overjoyed. It seemed these several tens of kilograms of heavenly true water were really valuable. Joyfully, he dropped to his knees and bowed to Patriarch Yuanhua, while Patriarch Jiang Yun also dropped to his knees and bowed happily. Taoist White Sparrow was so angry that his face turned pale, and his lips turned red like pig's blood sausages. Wu Qi sat back on the big chair. Princess Zhang held his palm, and only then did he hear Patriarch Yuanhua say with a smile, "It's great that we have such an excellent disciple in our sect. 1 year and 6 months later, we will have a greater chance of winning the life and death match with Huiling sect." Patriarch Yuanhua was smiling happily, and even Taoist Min's eyes were filled with a hint of joy when he looked at Wu Qi. No matter what, the life and death match between Yuanhua sect and Huiling sect was closely related to the future of both sections. Although Wu Qi was a peak-stage nascent soul cultivator, his overall strength was actually comparable to a peak-stage nascent divinity cultivator. That was a great advantage for both sects. As long as Wu Qi was a little bit more ruthless, he could work together with other nascent divinity cultivators and kill 3 to 5 nascent divinity cultivators from Huiling sect all of a sudden. With that, they would definitely win the match. Even though there was a huge conflict between Taoist Min and Immortal Greenstaff, as it was related to the future of both sects, Taoist Min still had a higher appreciation for Wu Qi. While the people of Yuanhua sect were chatting among themselves, a few prominent disciples of Luo Ling Pavilion were sitting on their chairs, shivering. Their hearts were in a mess, and no one knew what they were thinking. All of a sudden, light footsteps were heard coming from outside. Very soon, an old man clad in a pale golden robe, tall and burly, with a dignified appearance, walked into the hall, escorted by several dozens of cultivators. From the corner of his eyes, Wu Qi gave these cultivators a glance. Obviously, the old man clad in a pale golden robe was a heaven immortal, while the weakest among the rest were peak-stage nascent soul cultivators. About 15 to 16 of them had the cultivation base of nascent divinity realm. The old man walked into the hall, cupped his fist and bowed to Patriarch Yuanhua without saying a word. Patriarch Yuanhua nodded slowly and said, "You're welcome, Elder Yun. There is some misunderstanding between the disciples of Yuanhua sect and Eminent Cloud sect, and the reason I'm here is to discuss it with Elder Yun." However, the old man, Yun Tianao, the chief elder of Luo Ling Palace in Eminent Cloud sect, the grand uncle of Yun Wuqi, said with a sullen face, "Patriarch Yuanhua, there is no need to say anything. It is my fault. I did not teach my son well." How could Yun Wuqi commit such a despicable act? He has tarnished the reputation of Eminent Cloud sect. Yun Tianao sighed faintly, then said in a deep voice, "Our ancestral master has asked about this matter, and he has learned all the details of the incident. This is indeed the fault of our disciples. In a few days, we'll send a new reliable disciple to take over all the affairs in Luo Ling Pavilion, and all the disciples here will be sent back to Eminent Cloud sect for a severe punishment. They have really tarnished the reputation of our sect, and we can't tolerate such villains." Yun Tianao's words sounded righteous, but Wu Qi had a feeling that there were too many things hidden behind Yun Tianao's dignified appearance. His own grandnephew was eaten in front of everyone, and yet, he did not care about it at all? Was he not angry at all? Were all the members of Eminent Cloud sect saints? Impossible. Wu Qi shook his head lightly, but he noticed that Taoist Qi was doing the same thing as him. Wu Qi gave Taoist Qi a look. Taoist Qi narrowed his eyes and gave Wu Qi a faint smile. Upon hearing what Yun Tianao said, Patriarch Yuanhua sighed faintly. He nodded and said, "Elder Yun, please apologize to Reverend Yun. Once I'm done dealing with the miscellaneous affairs in the future, I'll definitely pay you a visit and apologize to Reverend Yun." He gave Wu Qi a look, then said angrily, "Wu Qi, even if you are in the right, killing an innocent disciple of Eminent Cloud sect is still a serious crime. Eminent Cloud sect has a good relationship with Yuanhua sect, and you are being too reckless." After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Yuanhua said sternly, "I'll punish you by sending you to the heart-cleaning pool behind the mountain and face the wall." Chapter 384. The back mountain of Green Cliff Mountain was a vast, primitive jungle with no signs of human habitation. There were countless exotic flowers and trees here, and 90% of the various fresh fruits and flowers enjoyed by Yuan Hua sect's cultivators, as well as the ingredients needed to brew various spirit wines, came from here. In order to protect the environment here, Yuan Hua sect's disciples were not allowed to enter the back mountain, let alone cultivate here. Once a cultivator began cultivating, he or she would have to breathe in and out natural energies. If a heaven immortal were to cultivate in the back mountain, he or she might consume nearly half of the natural energies stored in the back mountain with just one breath. Therefore, Yuan Hua sect's disciples were not allowed to enter the back mountain, as it was so that the exotic flowers and trees could receive sufficient nourishment from the underground energy veins. At the same time, as the heart cleaning pool was located right in the back mountain, no one was allowed to get close to it. Amidst the ocean of trees, there was a clearing several acres in circumference, surrounded by several dozens of towering trees. A dark green pool was seen reflecting the faint sunlight. Dozens of big and small jade blocks were laid on the edge of the pool, each of which was clearly marked with the marks of buttocks being grinded by the flesh of buttocks. On one of the blocks, there was a mark of buttocks that was about an inch deep. The heart cleaning pool was the most mysterious, yet also the most useless place in Yuan Hua sect. When rewarding disciples, they would be sent here to face the wall, and when punishing disciples who had committed mistakes, they would be sent here to face the wall as well. The only difference was the set of hand incantation used to control the pool. If punishing disciples, they just needed to change the position of the celestial star corresponding to the heart cleaning pool, and at noon every day, the pool would spray out a bone-piercing cold air and a heat wave strong enough to cook a man. This was the principle behind the so-called tempering of the mind. If punishing disciples, they just needed to lock the few natural energy veins beneath the pool to another celestial star, and at noon every day, illusions of white mist would appear above the pool, showing the movement of celestial stars, the rise and fall of the sun and moon, the blooming and withering of flowers in 4 seasons, and the birth and death of humans. According to Patriarch Yuan Hua's experience, these illusions could increase the probability of a cultivator entering the realm of Tao enlightenment by 50%. In the realm of Tao enlightenment, the supreme Tao of the heaven and earth obtained in 1 day and 1 night was comparable to the result of 100 years or even 1,000 years of laborious cultivation. With such a miraculous effect, the heart cleaning pool had naturally become the most important place in Yuan Hua sect. Naturally, those disciples who were sent here for a secluded cultivation were the most outstanding elites of Yuan Hua sect, and they were here to receive the rewards. Whether it was punishment or reward, Patriarch Yuan Hua just needed to change the incantation gesture. To the outside world, everyone knew that the heart cleansing pool was a place where Yuan Hua sect punished its disciples severely. But only a handful of Yuan Hua sect elders knew the exact function of the pool. Wu Qi sat cross-legged on a white jade block, frowning as he pinched the flaming feather sparrow, who had its eyes closed and was chirping non-stop. But, as every blade of grass and every tree here was personally arranged by Patriarch Yuan Hua, Wu Qi could not simply change the facilities here. Therefore, he had no choice but to bear with it. Patting the bird, Wu Qi poured a bowl of soup which he had concocted in the past 2 days into the bird's mouth. It could improve the purity of bloodline and temper the fleshly body of demon beasts. After that, he fished out the tiny thread of divine bird bloodline. The fire feather sparrow, which was constantly twisting like a flood dragon, gave off a faint heat. As soon as the fire feather sparrow felt this heat, it immediately began to struggle violently. It flapped its wings, which had yet to fully form, and tried to pounce on the blood vein. Wu Qi gave the bird to Princess Zhonglu and cried out softly, "Feed it 3 drops of your blood essence. Quick!" Princess Zhonglu took over the bird. A tiny cut opened up on her fingertip, from which 3 drops of blood glinting with a 5-colored luster flew out and entered the bird's mouth. Wu Qi held the divine bird bloodline in both hands and recited a few incantations. Abruptly, a great amount of red light and heat burst out of the tiny blood, and a long cry of phoenix could be vaguely heard coming out from it. It is indeed the bloodline of the phoenix. Although it is only a tiny thread, I can still spend some time feeding this little thing some soup, and it will eventually transform into a descendant of the phoenix. Zi Xian, if you continue to temper it with your energy every day, this little guy's future achievements will be extraordinary. Wu Qi chuckled, then pointed his finger at the flaming wing sparrow's chest, leaving behind a tiny blood mark, and shoved the blood into its body. A bird cry echoed for several tens of miles, and a red light flickered all over the bird's body. It suddenly expanded to twice its size, and at the same time, pale golden feathers sprouted from its body. A red phoenix coronet feather grew out of its head, and a long tail feather extended from its tail. Each tail feather was shining with a dazzling light, and the patterns on them formed a faintly discernible primordial character. The fire feathers bird let out a few joyful cries, then opened its eyes and saw Princess Zhonglu. A wisp of the bloodline aura that was very close to Princess Zhonglu was emanating from its body, and it happily jumped on Princess Zhongli's shoulder. Then, it tilted its neck and curled up on Princess Zhongli's body, falling into a deep sleep. It would take at least a few days for it to absorb and melt this bloodline, as well as the bowl of soup that Wu Qi fed it just now. Wu Qi handed a 1-foot-tall jade bottle to Princess Zhonglu and said, "Every 7 days, feed it 3 kilograms of soup. This is the ancestral awakening and body-tempering soup I brewed to purify its bloodline and strengthen its fleshly body. It's specially made for demon birds. Feed it 21 times, and it will reach the limit of its current fleshly body. When its cultivation base improves in the future, you can feed it more soup." Princess Zhongli happily took over the jade bottle, stroked the fire feathers bird, and said smilingly, "What should it be called? What should it be called?" Wu Qi knitted his brows and said in a low voice, "How about we call it Little Sparrow? Or Little Sparrow?" When it came to naming these little pets, Wu Qi had to admit that he was a little stupid. Princess Zhongli murmured the names of Little Sparrow and Little Sparrow, then nodded and said, "Let's call it Little Sparrow. It sounds similar to Baijuer and Baiju." Princess Zhongli happily kissed Wu Qi on the cheek, then found a white jade block and sat cross-legged on it. Immediately, she fell into a state of enlightenment. Her aura suddenly became hazy and indistinct, as if she had disappeared from this world. Sitting next to her, Lord Xianxing and Catfish Flood Dragon gave Princess Zhongli a look of horror, then shook their heads helplessly. It had been 7 to 8 days since they came to the heart-cleansing pool to reflect on their mistakes. Even with the guidance of the heart-cleansing pool and the phenomenon in the white fog that surged out at noon, they still had not succeeded in entering the Tao comprehension realm. But, during these 7 to 8 days, Princess Zhongli could enter the state of enlightenment easily, anytime and anywhere, as long as she wanted to. This was a great blow to Lord Xianxing and Catfish Flood Dragon. She breathed out a heavy sigh, tilted her big head and said, "Didn't he just eat a human? That Yun Tianao seems to be quite reasonable. But, since he has admitted his mistake, why did that old man Yuan Hua still ask us to sit here like fools?" Lord Xianxing narrowed his eyes and said with a cold grin, "Yun Tianao? Reasonable? What do you think, brother?" At noon, Wu Qi fished out several dozens of blood crystals and soul crystals from Black Dragon Spirit Ring and threw them to Lord Xianxing and Catfish Flood Dragon. Face is the most important thing for immortal cultivators, he said coolly. Eminent Cloud Sect bowed and admitted their mistake after Cu-8 Yun Wuqi. There must be something fishy going on. Just you wait and see, this matter will not end so easily. Perhaps, something has happened in Eminent Cloud Sect, and they can't spare anyone to seek revenge on us for the time being. Or perhaps, they are waiting for us and Huiling Sect to suffer a great loss before they strike. In any case, Yun Tianao is a reasonable man? In that case, I'm the reasonable ancestor. A strange howl was heard coming from the bottom of the heart-cleansing pool. A large sheet of white mist soared into the sky, and amidst it, a pitch-black wasteland was revealed. It was a barren wasteland, and rainwater was drizzling down. After that, the grass sprouted, birds flew, and the grasses grew tall. It was a place full of vitality. Lord Xianxing quickly swallowed a blood crystal and a soul crystal. While absorbing the enormous energy contained in them, He fixed his eyes on the strange phenomenon amidst the white mist, focusing all his attention on it. Meanwhile, Catfish Flood Dragon swallowed all the blood and soul crystals that Wu Qi threw to her, then stared blankly at the white mist for a moment. After that, her body tilted to one side, and her snores shook the sky as she fell asleep. In her sleep, Catfish Flood Dragon licked her lips a few times and said, "Yun Tianao, it looks delicious. I'm the reasonable ancestor. TSK, don't tell me those two little girls were bullied by those people from Yuanhua sect?" Wu Qi narrowed his eyes as he recalled the two little girls who were rescued by Catfish Flood Dragon. He did not expect that Catfish Flood Dragon had a very strong sense of justice despite her silly appearance. As for the two little girls who were being fostered in Greenwood Peak, they also had a very good aptitude in cultivation. The only question now was whether they could join Yuanhua sect to cultivate. If Yuanhua sect did not want them, he would ask Zhang Lu to take them as his serving ladies. After sorting out what had happened in the past few days, Wu Qi exercised the mystic eyes of universe and focused all his attention on the strange phenomenon amidst the white mist. Princess Zhang Lu had an amazing innate talent, as she could enter the state of enlightenment at any time. It was as if she was a drop of water, and the heavenly Tao was a vast ocean. It was only natural for a drop of water to fuse with the ocean. But Wu Qi did not have such an incredible innate talent. He had to focus all his attention on the white mist, and only then could he sense some vague traces of the heavenly Tao from it. One blood and soul crystal after another kept entering Wu Qi's body from the Black Dragon Spirit Ring, and were gradually digested and absorbed by him. His 10 innate spirit embryos were crazily absorbing the enormous energy contained in the blood and soul crystals, growing up gradually. With a single inhalation and exhalation, a large amount of natural energy around Wu Qi disappeared, and all the natural energies in the back of Green Cliff Mountain began to gather towards Wu Qi. Even the natural energies in the underground energy veins began to flow towards him. The speed at which Wu Qi absorbed the natural energies was simply too fast. The heavenly Tao and cultivation experiences from Immortal Chang Wu, Vagabond Qin Yi, Immortal Xian Yang, and Lady Dark Goldwater inside his two fake nascent souls were being absorbed by the innate spirit embryos like tidewater. The 10 innate Jin Dan innate spirit embryos that merged with Wu Qi's 3 separated spiritual souls and 7 physical souls were growing and growing stronger. Gradually, each of them was glinting with a golden gleam, and the light was faintly spreading out from Wu Qi's body. A strange fragrance was wafting around Wu Qi. All of a sudden, a large patch of dark clouds began to form in the sky. The dark clouds took a very long time to form. Time passed day after day, and it was 36 days after Wu Qi entered the state of enlightenment that the dark clouds finally took shape. All of a sudden, the void trembled, and a loud cracking noise rang out. A purple thunderbolt as thick as a thumb struck down from the dark clouds. Chapter 385. The purple heavenly thunderbolts came crashing down. Catfish Flood Dragon, who was sleeping soundly, opened her eyes abruptly, cried out, and spun to flee. She was a demon dragon, and although she could control wind, rain, and lightning, she was most afraid of the thunderbolts of the heavenly tribulation. The thunderbolts produced by the great Tao of heaven and earth could cause at least 100 times more damage to any demon with an evil background. Lord Xianxing raised his head in horror. A beam of water rushed out of his palm, and the seal of the Dragon King, which was given to the Lord of Longyuan River by the Celestial Court, emerged and hovered above the water. A mighty aura rushed out, and Lord Xianxing, who was also locked down by the heavenly thunderbolts, was no longer affected by the thunderbolts. This was the special privilege of the immortal officials appointed by the Celestial Court. Unless the heavenly tribulation was specifically targeted at the immortal officials, as long as they produced their own seal, even if they were watching someone transcending the heavenly tribulation at a close distance, they would not be harmed by the heavenly thunderbolts. At the moment, Princess Zhang Lu and Wu Qi were also enveloped by the heavenly thunderbolts. Wu Qi was meditating with his eyes closed. A strange 5-colored light was emanating from his body, and a fragrant aroma was assailing the nostrils. White fluid that looked like butter was oozing out of his pores. The fluid flowed out from his body and flowed along the white jade mound to the ground. After absorbing the fluid, the tiny grasses around the white jade mound began to swell and grow, turning from an ordinary weed into a plump Ganoderma grass. Although it was only the lowest grade Ganoderma, the mushroom-like Ganoderma used by mortals as medicine, it had transformed from a weed into a Ganoderma, which showed how miraculous the effect of the white fluid was. Meanwhile, Wuqi seemed to have fallen into a state that he could not extricate himself from. He did not sense the arrival of the heavenly thunderbolts at all. It was Princess Zhonglu who suddenly opened her eyes. A five-colored divine light flickered rapidly in them as she casually beckoned at the heavenly thunderbolt. The purple thunderbolt obediently transformed into a stream of light and fell into Princess Zhongli's palm. Under the horrified gazes of Lord Xianxing and Catfish Flood Dragon, the purple thunderbolt was completely absorbed by Princess Zhonglu, and the mysterious and unfathomable aura emanating from Princess Zhongli's body grew stronger. Smiling cheerfully, Princess Zhongli cried out, "Isn't it just a thunder tribulation? Why is it so strong?" Dozens of thunderbolts came smashing down in a row. Princess Zhongli twitched her little mouth and sprung up into the air indifferently, hovering above Wuqi. All the thunderbolts hit Princess Zhongli's body, but they were all absorbed into her body. The five-colored divine ray behind her transformed into a misty cloud and wheeled around her, while her nascent soul flew out of her body and stared at the thunderbolts that kept falling from the sky with its eyes wide open. All of a sudden, Princess Zhongli's nascent soul flew out of her body and stared at the thunderbolts that kept falling from the sky. Lord Xianxing and Catfish Flood Dragon cried out in shock at the same time. Using a nascent soul to fight against a thunderbolt? That was something that even a heaven immortal would not dare to do. If you asked a heaven immortal to release his immortal soul, which he had painstakingly cultivated, to fight against the thunderbolt, he would definitely use an immortal item and destroy your soul first. Nascent soul, nascent divinity, and immortal soul were all the condensation of one's own soul, just at different levels. As long as one was a soul, he or she would be afraid of thunderbolts. Unless one had cultivated the great Tao of Gold Immortal, and his or her immortal soul had completely merged with his or her fleshly body, making his or her immortal body faintly discernible, while his or her immortal soul had become pure and condensed, he or she would not be afraid of ordinary thunderbolts, astral winds, xianbing, heavenly flame, and many other things. How could Princess Zhonglu, with her cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm, use her nascent soul to provoke a thunderbolt? If she used her fleshly body to absorb the thunderbolt, it could be said that her innate talent was extraordinary, or that she had learned some unique thunder-controlling technique. But, using her nascent soul to fight against the thunderbolt? Had she gone mad, or had she suddenly become stupid? Under Lord Xianxing's horrified gaze, a strong five-colored light suddenly burst out from Princess Zhongli's nascent soul. Not only was it not turned into a wisp of smoke by the thunderbolt, but it had also become stronger and more condensed. The complexion of the nascent soul had become much better, as it flew and danced around Princess Zhonglu, then waved its hand at the dark clouds in the sky, causing another thunderbolt to strike down. Lord Xianxing and Catfish Flood Dragon were struck dumb. They exchanged a glance and shook their heads at the same time. Catfish Flood Dragon said in a low voice, "Brother Wuqi is a monster, and Princess Zixian is also a monster. Using her nascent soul to fight against the thunderbolt? Xianxing, why don't you give it a try?" Lord Xianxing gnashed his teeth in anger. He gave Catfish Flood Dragon a fierce glare and scolded in a low voice, "Why don't you give it a try?" Catfish Flood Dragon shook her big catfish head and murmured, "I'm afraid of death. Why don't you give it a try?" Lord Xianxing was speechless. He turned his head angrily to look at Wuqi, no longer paying attention to the silly Catfish Flood Dragon. "Do you think I, Lord Xianxing, am not afraid of death?" The white fluid flowing out of Wuqi's body gradually dried up, and his body slowly shriveled and collapsed, as if all his blood essence was being absorbed by some strange existence. Very soon, he had become a skeleton that was all skin and bones. But his skeleton was shrouded in a five-colored auspicious light, and there were even wisps of strong golden light faintly shining from within. Nourished by an enormous amount of blood and soul crystals of heaven immortals, the 10 innate spirit embryos in Wu Qi's 7 stealing heaven meridians in his arms were growing stronger and stronger. Like the embryos in an egg that had received sufficient nutrition, they were growing stronger and stronger. He had even entered the state of enlightenment of Tao. In just 36 days, he had gradually fused the enlightenment of the heavenly Tao obtained by immortal Chang Wu and the others into his own innate spirit embryos, just like an ordinary cultivator who had cultivated for thousands or tens of thousands of years. If Wu Qi were to study the heavenly Tao by himself, even if he entered the state of enlightenment of Tao, 36 days would be equivalent to thousands or tens of thousands of years of laborious cultivation for ordinary cultivators, and what he could gain would still be limited, as he would have to start from scratch, searching for and capturing the heavenly Tao by himself. But with Lady Dark Goldwater's memory, and the heavenly Tao epigraph found in the immortal souls of immortal Chang Wu and the others, Wu Qi was basically standing on the shoulders of these immortals, and all he needed to do was to fully comprehend the profound principles of the heavenly Tao they had obtained. The 36 days of enlightenment of Tao had given Wu Qi's innate spirit embryos everything he needed to improve his cultivation base. Crack, crack. Suddenly, countless cracks appeared on Wu Qi's innate spirit embryos, and vaguely, a strong five-colored light burst out from them. As the spirit embryos broke apart, some useless spirit fluid oozed out from them, flowing out from Wu Qi's body and out of his body. They were the white fluid that was emitting a fragrant aroma. As the fluid flowed out from Wu Qi's body, it brought away some impurities in his body and purified his fleshly body. 10 sesame-sized nascent souls hovered quietly in Wu Qi's 7 stealing heaven meridians. Some of them were crying, some were laughing, some were dancing, and some were sitting cross-legged. They came in all shapes and sizes, and their expressions were constantly changing. 10 innate Jin Dan corresponded to Wu Qi's 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls. Naturally, 10 innate nascent souls were born from the innate spirit embryos. Once the innate nascent souls were formed, the heaven and earth sensed it immediately. The heaven tribulation came roaring down, but it was stopped by Princess Zhonglu, and could not cause any harm to Wu Qi. However, Wu Qi's crisis came one after another. The formation of 10 innate nascent souls immediately unleashed a violent suction force that could frighten an ordinary immortal cultivator to death. Everything inside Wu Qi's body was sucked into the 10 innate nascent souls. Within a blink of an eye, all his power was sucked out, and the energies contained in the 2 fake nascent souls were also sucked dry, nearly causing the 2 fake nascent souls to disintegrate. When Wu Qi's energies were sucked dry, the innate nascent souls immediately began to absorb his blood and energy essence, as well as his life force. Conveniently, it also sucked the nascent divinity that was formed in his spiritual ocean using a mystic technique into the nascent souls. The sudden shriveling and collapse of Wu Qi's body was the result of the nascent souls absorbing his life force and energy essence. Seeing that Wu Qi's bones and marrow were about to be sucked dry by the 10 innate nascent souls, he moved his finger, and all the blood crystals and souls of heaven immortals stored in the black dragon spirit ring fused into his body. At that very moment, all the blood crystals refined from immortal Chang Wu, vagabond Qin Yi, immortal Xian Yang, and the 3 heaven immortals who died in the tunnel of heavenly water dark palace had fused into his body. A loud rumble was heard coming out from Wu Qi's body. It sounded like the collapse of a mountain or the breaking of an ocean. Several thousand blood crystals and soul crystals crumbled, and all their energies were sucked into the 10 innate nascent souls at the same time. The nascent souls, which were as small as a sesame seed, suddenly expanded to about 1 foot tall. They laughed joyfully together, opened their mouths at the same time, and sprayed out 10 streams of extremely pure innate energies that belonged to the 5 elements. Red flame, green wood, white gold, black water, and yellow earth, they enveloped and filled up Wu Qi's entire body in an instant. On top of that, a great amount of blood and energy essence, which was 100 times greater than the life force absorbed just now, was fed back to Wu Qi, filling up his shriveled body in an instant. Cracking noises were heard coming from Wu Qi's body, as his skin cracked inch by inch. 9 layers of skin, which were thicker than the hide of an old cow, fell off from Wu Qi's body, revealing his newly born skin, which was a few times smoother and smoother than the suet jade. The innate energies kept crashing crazily inside Wu Qi's body, as if countless heavy hammers were hammering Wu Qi's body from the inside out, dispersing all the impurities in his body, leaving behind the purest innate flesh and blood, without any acquired impurities. At this moment, Wu Qi's Tao heart was brightly lit. Every thought of the 10 nascent souls, which had been divided into 10 parts, could resonate with the laws of heaven and earth. Suddenly, he was surprised to find that he seemed to possess the same magical power as Princess Zhanglu, which allowed him to enter the state of enlightenment with ease. As the innate nascent souls continued to grow, Wu Qi reached out his hand and grabbed towards the black dragon spirit ring. Countless energy stones rushed out like a tide, and the energies contained in them transformed into a blinding white beam and rushed into Wu Qi's palm. An enormous amount of energies kept rushing into Wu Qi's body, and were quickly absorbed and digested by the innate nascent souls, transforming into the innate purple mist within them. After that, they were spat out a huge amount of energies and deposited into all the meridians in Wu Qi's body. The endless mysteries of the heavenly Tao were flying and dancing in Wu Qi's mind. Wu Qi was fully absorbing the mysteries of the heavenly Tao epigraphs from the heaven immortals he killed. His cultivation base and magic power were improving at an incredible rate, and in just a blink of an eye, all 10 of his innate nascent souls were brought to peak stage nascent soul realm. After that, the rapid advancement of Wu Qi's cultivation base came to an abrupt halt, as his corporeal body could no longer withstand the drastic improvement of energies. If he continued to improve, his corporeal body would definitely disintegrate on the spot. The energies contained in each of his innate nascent souls were 10 times more than that of an ordinary peak stage nascent divinity cultivator. Therefore, the energies contained in 10 innate nascent souls were at least 100 times more than that of an ordinary peak stage nascent divinity cultivator. Putting aside the quality of the energies, the amount of energies in Wu Qi's body was more than enough to fight against 3 to 5 ordinary heaven immortals. The purity of the innate energies of peak stage nascent soul realm was only slightly weaker than the immortal energy. Now, Wu Qi truly had the overall strength to fight against heaven immortals. But all of a sudden, Wu Qi heard a whistling noise coming from a distance. He sprung to his feet immediately and thrust his palm backward, shooting out a stream of flame that burned everything around him, including the wild grasses that had absorbed the liquid form of his spirit embryo mother into Ganoderma grass, into ashes. The cultivators from Yuanhua sect had noticed the commotion and had finally arrived. Chapter 386. In a flurry, Wu Qi destroyed everything around him. At this moment, he could not care less that everything here was personally arranged by Patriarch Yuanhua. He wanted to erase all the traces that could expose that he was different from ordinary people. However, looking at the tribulation clouds above him, Wu Qi could not help but feel a headache. How was he going to explain the origin of this heavenly tribulation? Why would the heavens send down a thunder tribulation to strike him for no reason? That did not make sense. On top of that, this heavenly tribulation was extraordinarily powerful. Although the power of each tribulation thunder was only equivalent to the minor heavenly tribulation of an ordinary nascent divinity cultivator when he transformed his nascent soul into his nascent divinity, the number was simply too huge. From the first thunderbolt until now, at least 300 of them had struck down. Even the unlucky longbow people did not have such an abnormal thunder tribulation. What kind of excuse could he come up with to fool them? For a moment, Wu Qi was troubled. Princess Zhanglu was hovering in midair, her nascent soul happily absorbing one thunderbolt after another. Clouds and sword beams kept approaching from all directions. Patriarch Yuanhua, 33 heaven immortals, and several dozens of nascent divinity cultivators who were in charge of the actual affairs of the sect had arrived. When they saw Princess Zhongli's nascent soul absorbing the thunderbolts as if it was just for fun, they were all struck dumb. With a blink, Patriarch Yuan Hua brought Taoist Qi, Taoist Min, and a group of elders and came next to Wu Qi. He grabbed Wu Qi's arm and asked, "What exactly is going on? Why are there thunderbolts striking down all of a sudden? Are any of you transcending the nascent divinity tribulation? Or is there some other reason? But this thunder tribulation, something is not right, something is not right. How much sin did he commit to attract so many thunderbolts?" Patriarch Yuan Hua stared at Wu Qi with his bright eyes, a look that said he would not stop until he found out the truth. Wu Qi spread his arms helplessly and said with a wry smile, "I really have no idea." Indeed, he had no idea that things would turn out like this. The shadowy figure who passed him the scroll of stealing did not mention anything about this. He did not mention that when the 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls fused with the innate gene Dan, gave birth to the innate spirit embryo, and finally transformed into the innate nascent soul, there would be such a shocking thunder tribulation. Hundreds of heavenly lightning bolts struck down continuously. If an ordinary cultivator were to be targeted by such a lightning tribulation, they would have long been turned into ashes. How could they be like Princess Zhonglu? All the elders of Yuan Hua sect stared at the tribulation cloud in the sky with their heads filled with confusion, then looked at Princess Zhonglu, who was absorbing the tribulation thunder under the cloud in an indifferent manner. What kind of abnormal talent did he have to be to treat tribulation lightning as a game? All the elders of Yuan Hua sect narrowed their eyes, their minds filled with all kinds of thoughts. Suddenly, Wu Qi sensed a pair of hostile eyes staring at him stealthily. After attaining the innate 5 elements nascent souls, Wu Qi's 6 senses had become dozens of times sharper. Even when an ordinary person's gaze fell on him, it felt like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, and he could sense it like a ripple. Wu Qi followed the gaze and looked over, and saw White Sparrow turning his head away with a gloomy face. So this guy still suspects me after all? He suspects that I'm the one who snatched his Jade Bone's soul-searching flag? His fingers twitched unnaturally. The Jade Bone's soul-searching flag was now lying in the Black Dragon spirit ring. Wu Qi blinked his eyes at Taoist White Sparrow, and could not help but find it funny in his mind. Even if you know I'm the one who snatched your Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, what can you do to me? Where's the proof? Where's the proof? You are a heaven immortal, and your immortal item was snatched away by a nascent soul junior. No matter how shameless you are, do you really have the guts to tell others about this? Wu Qi could not help being targeted by Taoist White Sparrow. There were many witnesses in Green Cliff Immortal Market that day, and it was impossible for Wu Qi to kill all of them. However, Wu Qi's thought was, even if I snatched it from you, what can you do to me? If they were in Yuan Hua sect, you would never lower your face and say that you were robbed by Wu Qi. So, outside of Yuan Hua sect, why would Wu Qi be afraid of you, White Sparrow? Grinning coldly, Wu Qi revealed a row of white teeth at Taoist White Sparrow. Taoist White Sparrow's face turned unsightly, as if a layer of frost could be scraped off from his gloomy face. The tribulation clouds in the sky gradually dispersed. The fact that Wu Qi had formed his innate nascent soul was something that the heaven and earth hated out of jealousy. Innate nascent soul was a miraculous existence. Although it followed the orthodox path of Qi cultivators, it was not something that ordinary nascent souls, nascent divinities, or immortal souls could compare with. Innate nascent souls were in perfect harmony with the Tao of heaven and earth. Once they were formed, they would be like cancer cells, constantly absorbing all sorts of principles from the heaven and earth, gathering the essence of the heaven and earth to strengthen themselves. The heavenly Tao had sent a thunder tribulation to attack Wu Qi, and it was just an instinctive precaution. Now that Wu Qi had formed his innate nascent soul, the mystic technique of scroll of stealing had automatically retracted his aura. As the tribulation clouds could no longer sense Wu Qi's existence, they dispersed on their own. Just when everyone thought that this was the end of the incident, all of a sudden, the the tribulation clouds gathered in the sky once again. But this time, the tribulation clouds were actually dark green. Amidst the green thunderclouds that came rolling and rolling from all directions, countless silvery thunderbolts were flashing and flashing soundlessly. A frightening, suffocating pressure came pressing down from above. Patriarch Yuan Hua and all the elders of Yuan Hua sect were struck dumb. Is this the legendary, green immortal destroying thunder? Patriarch Yuan Hua tilted his head, uncertain. I think so. This is the legendary green immortal destroying thunder that the heaven and earth sent down when a heaven immortal cultivates the great Tao of gold immortal. Taoist Qi murmured to himself. This doesn't make sense. Someone on Green Cliff Planet has become a gold immortal? Haha, don't tell me it's one of our disciples? Taoist Qi seemed to be losing his mind. He let out a few dry and emotionless laughs, then continued laughing foolishly. The other Yuan Hua sect elders did not say anything. Almost instinctively, they sprung into the sky and fled as far as they could. This was the legendary green immortal destroying thunder that could help one break through the realm of heaven immortals and become a gold immortal. According to the legends, out of 10 peak stage heaven immortals, only 1 or 2 lucky ones could transcend this calamity and become a gold immortal. Even peak stage heaven immortals could not withstand this thunder tribulation, let alone them who were merely lower tier heaven immortals. Patriarch Yuan Hua grabbed Wu Qi and was about to flee. But Wu Qi flicked his sleeve and shook off Patriarch Yuan Hua. Something is not right, he cried out in a deep voice. The thunder tribulation is coming for Zhang Lu. Although it is the green immortal destroying thunder, its power does not seem to be enough. Patriarch Yuan Hua was taken aback. Hastily, he raised his head and sensed the target of the tribulation cloud. Sure enough, it was coming for Princess Zhang Lu. But Princess Zhang Lu was perfectly fine, so why would a thunder tribulation suddenly attack her? Patriarch Yuan Hua glanced around and cried out in a low voice, "Heed my order, elders. Seal off the back of the mountain. No disciples are allowed to enter or leave. Everything that happened today is our sect's secret, and no one is allowed to leak it out." Taoist Qi, Taoist Min, and Chi took the order from their leader, bringing all the heaven immortal elders and several dozens of nascent divinity cultivators who held the real power in the sect, spreading out in all directions. Numerous restrictive spells were deployed, completely sealing off the back of Green Cliff Mountain, preventing any disciples from approaching. Squatting on Princess Zhang Li's shoulder, little Kaer suddenly flapped her wings and flew up into the sky, wheeling around Princess Zhang Li for a while. Princess Zhang Li's nascent soul exploded in midair, turning into a clump of 5-colored cloud and mist. The crowd was struck with great shock. Didn't that mean her 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls had completely dispersed? It was a sign that her soul was about to disperse. However, as soon as Princess Zhang Li's nascent soul disappeared, the green tribulation cloud in the sky suddenly sank down like a provoked bull. A deafening rumble of thunder that sounded like the beating of a drum exploded out from the cloud. The deafening rumble shook the crowd and made their blood and qi shiver violently. Even Wu Qi felt dizzy and was pushed tens of miles back. Meanwhile, Princess Zhang Lu was hovering in midair, with a faint smile on her face as she quietly watched the tribulation cloud approaching slowly. The 5-colored cloud that had dispersed from the nascent soul transformed into tiny streams of light and rushed into Princess Zhang Li's forehead. Suddenly, the surrounding natural energies began to fluctuate violently. Like soldiers who had just received an order, all the natural energies in the entire Green Cliff Mountain turned into airflows that could be seen with naked eyes, glowing brightly and rushing into Princess Zhang Li's body. The more natural energies Princess Zhang Lu absorbed, the thinner her aura became. Gradually, she became one with the natural energies, and could no longer be sensed by anyone. Wu Qi looked at Princess Zhang Lu thoughtfully. This method of hiding one's aura in the natural energies was quite similar to a few techniques in Scroll of Stealing, which could conceal one's aura and hide one's tracks. Many of the techniques found in the Scroll of Stealing were either stolen or obtained along the way. Could it be that the root of these few mystic techniques was related to Princess Zhang Li's bloodline? All of a sudden, the sky lit up as a green thunderbolt came smashing down from the sky with a frightening rumble. The entire green cliff mountain shook violently, and the underground energy veins were nearly shattered by the thunderbolt. Even though the power of the green immortal destroying thunderbolt had been reduced by many times, just a tiny thread of destructive aura contained in it was enough to make all the heaven immortals present find it hard to bear. Suddenly, Chi-Chi fell from the sky and landed on his back. Princess Zhonglu waved her hand, and a human figure shrouded in a faint five-colored gleam flew out from her body. The human figure let out a soft song, and immediately, the mountain ridges within 100 miles in circumference trembled. Countless tiny wisterias sprouted from the towering ancient trees on the back of Green Cliff Mountain, transforming into layers upon layers of wooden shields that greeted the thunderbolts falling from the sky. The thunderbolt was incredibly powerful, shattering layer after layer of wooden shields. But, no matter how many wooden shields were shattered, there was still an endless stream of wooden shields coming up to greet it. Initially, the thunderbolt was less than 30 feet away from Princess Zhonglu, but by the time the 3,000th wooden shield was shattered, it was already 10,000 feet away from her. Not only had the 3,000 wooden shields neutralized the thunderbolt, they had also forced the thunderbolt back 30,000 feet. Since the ancient times, when a heavenly tribulation came, one could either dodge it or resist it with brute force. No one had ever seen or heard of someone being forced back like this. All the heaven immortals who witnessed this were struck dumb. Only Patriarch Yuan Hua looked thoughtfully at Princess Zhonglu, his face filled with an unconcealable joy. She did not form her nascent divinity, but transformed into an innate divine soul. I can't believe this little girl actually possesses the bloodline of the ancient gods. Excellent. Yuan Hua sect has a bright future. Patriarch Yuan Hua murmured to himself with a smile on his face. But Wu Qi heard everything loud and clear. Innate divine soul? Ancient gods? All the knowledge related to this in Lady Dark Goldwater's memories flooded into his mind. The barbarian tribes on Myriad Immortals' planet are really, painstakingly arranged. Chapter 387. The Ancient Gods. Wu Qi sighed softly. The bloodline in Princess Zhongli's body was indeed extraordinary, and the fact that she was able to activate it at such a young age and form an innate divine soul must have something to do with the innate energy that Wu Qi had injected into her body. Ever since the great Saint Pangu created the heaven and earth, broke through the void and transformed his body into Pangu continent, all the laws and principles of the great Tao between the heaven and earth had attached themselves to various natural energies, transforming them into gods. This was the origin of the ancient gods. They had no parents and were immortal. Born between the heaven and earth, they mastered all the great Tao between the heaven and earth, such as the earth, water, fire, wind, rain, dew, cloud, mist, rise and fall of the sun, gale and drought, and even the withering of plants, the vicissitudes of the world. They were the first group of intelligent creatures between the heaven and earth. It was because of the ancient gods that there were all kinds of living beings in the world, as well as the endless magical creatures. In Lady Dark Goldwater's memory, even the emergence of the human race, who were blessed by the great Tao of heaven and earth and enjoyed the status of the spirit of all living beings, was due to the ancient gods. In the early days of the human race, the ancient gods were worshipped by the human race. They protected the human race, and taught the human race the skills and knowledge to survive on Pangu continent in the ancient times. At that time, the ancient gods sat high above the altar, while the human race knelt devoutly at the foot of the altar. However, as the number of human experts increased, especially the cultivators, and then the immortals, and finally, some of them overcame difficulties and became gold immortals, primordial immortals, and those legendary almighty experts. Something that Wu Qi was very familiar with happened. In order to fight for the right to speak and control of the heaven and earth, the human immortals joined hands with other powers and launched endless attacks against the ancient gods. It was a terrible war that lasted for thousands of eons. It was in that war that the Pangu continent was shattered for the first time, and for the first time, all the heavenly realms that revolved around the continent were created. Countless experts fell like rain, and the result of the war was that the ancient gods completely withdrew from the stage, while the human race stood tall on Pangu continent and became the masters of this universe. From the few memories Lady Dark Goldwater had about the ancient god race, Wuchi discovered that the ancient god race loved to mix their blood with humans the most. As a result, the children they gave birth to with humans would become demigods, possessing a long lifespan and magical powers. As the bloodline gradually thinned out, the descendants of these gods became weaker and weaker, but they still retained some magical powers, such as the ability to predict disasters, the power to communicate with all living beings in the world, and the ability to communicate with the spirits of the dead, heal all kinds of injuries, expel plagues, drive away beasts that threatened humans, and so on. Therefore, these descendants of the primal god race, even though they no longer had the powerful divine power to call the wind and summon the rain, they still occupied high positions within the human tribes. They became the high priests of the tribe and guided the development and advancement of the tribe. At the same time, they were also the symbol of the tribe's spiritual belief. Nowadays, unless a descendant of the ancient gods was lucky enough to find a spirit item that contained an innate aura, and the aura had to match the attribute of his or her bloodline, he or she would be able to absorb the innate energy, stimulate his or her bloodline, and form an innate divine soul, inheriting the tremendous divine power of his or her ancestors. But innate treasures were extremely rare. Whenever an innate treasure was occasionally found in the world of cultivators, it would immediately trigger a great war. It was impossible for those descendants of the ancient gods to succeed. Princess Zhonglu was the only one who managed to successfully awaken the bloodline of the ancient gods in her after receiving the innate 5 elements energies that Wu Qi had unreservedly channeled into her. After a period of arduous cultivation, as well as a great amount of blood and soul crystals of heaven immortals to replenish her strength, and after spending dozens of days meditating in the heart-cleansing pool, she had finally awakened the miraculous power that she inherited from the ancient times. Once the innate divine soul was formed, she would possess the power of the ancient gods. Even though this power was relatively weak now, as Princess Zhonglu continued to cultivate, her overall strength would only grow stronger and stronger. The most wonderful thing was that, unlike the immortal cultivators who acted in defiance of the heavens, the ancient gods themselves were the manifestation of the laws of heaven and earth. Every move they made was in line with the heavenly Tao. As long as Princess Zhonglu did not kill the innocent and accumulate too much negative karma, no matter how much she improved her overall strength, she would never have to face the heavenly tribulation again. The green immortal destroying thunder tribulation that struck down just now was merely because Princess Zhonglu had transformed her mortal body into a divine body. After this thunder tribulation, as long as she did not massacre an entire city, destroy an entire country, or slaughter hundreds of millions of living beings, all kinds of thunder tribulations would not strike her again. Wu Qi breathed out a sigh of relief. He hurriedly cupped his fist and bowed to Patriarch Yuan Hua as he said, "Ancestral Master, please ask all the elders and fellow disciples present to swear in prime oath that they will never tell anyone about Zixian's origin. Otherwise, she will be in big trouble in the future." Patriarch Yuan Hua nodded and said, "Of course. Don't worry, Ancestral Master has his own plans. The little girl's identity will not be leaked out." A smile bloomed on Patriarch Yuan Hua's face like a blooming chrysanthemum. His heart was filled with joy and contentment. The mystery of the ancient gods lay not only in their enormous power, but also in the various magical abilities they possessed. The formation of energy veins, the production of earth energy, and all kinds of magical abilities were of great significance to the current immortal sections. With the formation of earth energy veins, the tiny energy veins that were originally lacking in innate power could gradually grow and grow stronger with the help of the divine energy. From a low-grade, inferior energy vein, it was possible that it could be transformed into an upper-grade energy vein in the end. When all the energy veins under Green Cliff Planet were transformed into the upper-grade energy veins, the planet would become a first-class blessed land, and there would be no need to worry about the lack of natural energy anymore. The production of earth energy was to turn an ordinary barren land into a fertile spirit soil. On such a spirit soil, all kinds of spirit herbs would grow better and stronger, and their medicinal strength would be stronger. On a barren land like this, a Ganoderma could only be used as a medicine after growing for 1,000 years. But on a spirit soil like this, which was strengthened by divine energy, a Ganoderma could be used as a medicine in 10 years, improve its grade in 100 years, and transform into a Ganoderma immortal that could roam freely in the universe. Divine energy was in line with the great Tao of heaven and earth, and therefore, it had endless magical effects, as it could affect the environment in the universe. On the other hand, immortal energy was just a product of extreme compression and condensation of natural energy, and could only affect heaven immortals. Cultivating immortal energy could only make a mortal immortal live forever, and possess a tremendous power that could destroy the world. On the other hand, cultivating immortal energy could make the surrounding world have good weather and abundant natural resources. As the divine energy grew stronger, all living beings within the area controlled by the divine energy would be influenced by it, becoming stronger and healthier, free from diseases and disasters. Even the number of people suitable for cultivation would be much higher than in other places. Now that Princess Zhanglu had formed her innate divine soul, the future of Yuanhua sect would certainly be immeasurable. Little Kair, who had golden feathers all over her body except for the feathers on the top of her head, landed happily on Princess Zhongli's shoulder and pecked Princess Zhongli's ear with her beak. Princess Zhongli had dispelled the tribulation cloud and fused her divine soul into her body. Stepping on a pale, colorful cloud, she slowly descended before Wu Qi. Upon seeing her, Wu Qi was taken aback. Princess Zhongli looked the same as before, but there was a faint layer of colorful glow on her cheeks, which made her look even more beautiful. Her once crafty and quick-witted eyes had now become as clear as water, quiet and graceful. Only when she rolled her eyes occasionally did she regain her usual unruly and willful look. On top of that, the aura emanating from her body was like a warm spring breeze that caressed one's face, making one feel peaceful instinctively. Intuitively, Wu Qi discovered that Princess Zhongli seemed to have transformed from a crystal shard with thorns all over its body, and had turned into a jade ball that had been carved by an expert craftsman, glistening and shining brightly. Some fundamental changes had taken place, causing her to become completely different from before. Instinctively, Wu Qi sensed an aura that belonged to wisdom from her clear eyes, which were as clear as water, quiet and graceful. It was an ancient wisdom, like the wisdom that came from the beginning of time. It was the wisdom that was hidden in the bloodline of those ancient gods, inherited from generation to generation. It was the wisdom that was the most basic and original wisdom of this universe, this heaven and earth, and this world. Compared to such wisdom, the heavenly Tao of heaven immortals and the marvelous theories of gold immortals were as shallow and pale as a kindergarten kid showing off the knowledge that 1 + 1 = 2. Gently, Princess Zhongli nodded at Wu Qi with a smile, then said in a soft voice, "It seems that I've slept for a long time, and I finally woke up today." Wu Qi's heart sank slightly. "So, Zixian, are you still Zixian?" he asked in a low voice. He kept nagging in his mind, "Please don't play any tricks like reincarnating in someone else's body, seizing the bloodline of the body to be reborn. If that is the case, even if the person standing in front of me is some ancient god, Wu Qi will crush his bones and scatter his ashes, shattering his soul." Frowning slightly, Princess Zhonglu smiled faintly and said, "Of course Zixian is still Zixian. It's just that." Tilting her head, Princess Zhonglu chuckled and said, "It's just that I seem to have grown up all of a sudden. Looking back at the Zixian from a quarter of an hour ago, and the Zixian from over 10 years ago, I feel like I'm a child who hasn't grown up yet. But now, I seem to have learned a lot. It's just that there are many things that are too profound for me to understand." Gently holding Wu Qi's shoulder, Princess Zhongli naturally rested her head on Wu Qi's shoulder. Although she was doing such an intimate action in front of Patriarch Yuanhua, it was so natural that no one thought that Princess Zhongli's action was too ambiguous. Everyone felt that this was how Princess Zhonglu should be doing. Every move she made, every word she said, every movement she made, every sound she made, they were all so natural, as if this was how it should be since the creation of the world. This was the magical thing about the ancient gods. Currently, Princess Zhongli's cultivation base was still weak, so there were not too many strange signs happening to her. When she truly possessed the power of an ancient god, every move she made would be able to change the color of the wind and clouds, and make the sun and moon lose their luster. Even the so-called law of words would be nothing more than a trivial skill. Wu Qi put his arm around Princess Zhongli's waist, and both of them stood side by side in perfect harmony and natural harmony. It was like two great trees growing from the same root in a great mountain, and were supposed to stand together like this. When Wu Qi put his arm around Princess Zhongli's waist, he felt a sense of comfort and warmth in his heart, as if all the flaws he had in this world were suddenly filled up. Patriarch Yuan Hua looked at Wu Qi and Princess Zhongli gladly, then said in a deep voice, "All disciples present, swear in prime oath that nothing that happened today will be leaked to anyone." Just tell them that I've successfully broken through to the first-tier immortal realm, and that my overall strength has been improved." All the surrounding elders and nascent divinity disciples cupped their fists and answered. Chapter 388. In just a blink of an eye, Wu Qi and his companions had been cultivating in the heart-cleansing pool at the back of Green Cliff Mountain for 1 year and 5 months. Of course, what they told the public was that they had spent 17 months in the heart-cleansing pool because they had damaged the friendly relationship with eminent Cloud sect. During the 17 months of hard cultivation, Princess Zhonglu, Lord Xianxing, and Catfish Flood Dragon had made great progress in their cultivation base. Princess Zhonglu had formed her innate divine soul, but it was not the same as nascent soul and nascent divinity. No one could sense her actual overall strength. After Wu Qi taught her the false nascent soul technique from Scroll of Stealing, Princess Zhonglu had formed a dozen of them with great interest, basically including the natural forces of earth, water, fire, wind, metal, wood, water, fire, earth, lightning, thunder, cloud, mist, rainstorm, and many others. Naturally, her aura was at the level of peak stage nascent soul realm. Meanwhile, with the help of the heart-cleansing pool, Lord Xianxing and Catfish Flood Dragon had entered the state of enlightenment for a few times. Although it only lasted for 3 to 5 days each time, the benefits they gained were tremendous. Their nascent souls had become hazy, and they could communicate with the natural forces at any time to temper them and form their indestructible nascent divinity. However, in order to participate in the match, they had controlled their cultivation base, maintaining it at the realm of nascent soul. As for Wu Qi, he had not done anything for the past 1 year, but kept tempering his fleshly body and pushing his dragon transformation script to another level. The dragon transformation script was a body-tempering technique specially created by dragons for their descendants. The highest level was the 9 transformations of Divine Dragon, followed by the 18 transformations of Heavenly Dragon, and the 36 transformations of True Dragon, which corresponded to the tiers of Primordial Immortals, Gold Immortals, and Heaven Immortals. However, there was an even lower-level technique in the Dragon Transformation script, which was the 3 transformations of Flood Dragon below the True Dragon transformation. The 3 transformations of Flood Dragon was a technique that could allow those low-grade flood dragons, such as serpents and fishes, to improve the purity of their bloodline and strengthen their bodies, so that they could transcend the heavenly tribulation and transcend into True Dragon. The first transformation of the Flood Dragon corresponded to the cultivators of the Hotian, Xiantian, and Jin Dan realms. The second transformation of the Flood Dragon corresponded to the cultivators of the nascent soul realm. The third transformation of the Flood Dragon corresponded to the cultivators of the nascent soul realm, all the way until they transcended the tribulation and ascended. After over a year of laborious cultivation, he had completed all the cultivation techniques of the third transformation of Flood Dragon for his fleshly body. Dragons were not considered real dragons. They were often referred to as demonic dragons by pure-blooded dragons. They were even referred to as demonic beasts by proud dragons. Therefore, the body cultivated by the WRM transformation was covered in knots of muscles, revealing its sharpness. It was like a treasured sword that had just been refined, and it was filled with an oppressive might. Each and every one of his movements was accompanied by a tremendous force, and a gentle palm strike could topple a mountain. The fleshly body of the dragons was one of the strongest fleshly bodies in the domain. After cultivating the third transformation of the flood dragon, the strength of Wu Qi's fleshly body was several times stronger than those nascent divinity cultivators who specialized in body tempering. His muscles were truly as tough as iron. If ordinary Qi refining cultivators were careless and let him get close to them, he could easily break their bones and tear their tendons with just a casual strike. If they did not have a good spirit item to protect themselves, it was not impossible for them to die on the spot. A deep breathing sound that sounded like the roar of thunder rang out. Suddenly, a piece of ground near the heart-cleansing pool protruded. With his upper body naked, Wu Qi pushed away the thick rock layer with brute force and drilled out from the ground. Princess Zhonglu was already standing at the side. In front of her floated a few feet wide clump of clear water, and in her hand was a snow-white towel. When Wu Qi took a deep breath and retracted his cultivation technique, Princess Zhonglu had already gently dipped the towel in the clear water and wiped away the dirt and dust on Wu Qi's body. While wiping Wu Qi's body, Princess Zhonglu smiled and said with a slightly sarcastic tone, "Look at you now, you look so scary." Wu Qi retracted his cultivation technique and helplessly looked at his body, which had become so angular and bulging with muscles. He smiled helplessly and said, "When I transcend the heavenly tribulation and start cultivating the true dragon transformation, I won't look like this anymore. The shape of a true dragon is like the wind, rain, mist, and lightning. It can devour the heaven and earth, and can hide in a mustard seed. It has endless divine abilities and magical powers, and will never look like this." She poked Wu Qi's chest muscles with her finger, twitching her lips. Then, she waved her hand and forcefully threw the ball of water onto Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi was drenched by the water, but within a blink of an eye, the water kept spinning and leaving Wu Qi's body, bringing away all the dust on his body. Wu Qi stretched his body and let out a series of creaking noises from all the joints in his body. He took out a long robe and put it on, then gave a loud and sonorous whistle. On top of a parasol tree, little Kair, who was standing on the treetop in a daze, suddenly fell down from the treetop, landing on the ground with all four limbs spread out. After a long while, little Kair finally realized that Wu Qi was whistling. She lazily flapped her wings and flew up into the sky, weakly holding her fat belly and landing on top of Wu Qi's head. After that, she fiercely scratched Wu Qi's hair. Wu Qi sighed helplessly as he stroked little Kair's plump body. Perhaps, this was the fattest descendant of a phoenix in the history? She did not look like a phoenix at all. Instead, she looked more like a piglet. Princess Zhonglu had been spoiling her way too much. During the past 1 year, she had been feeding her a huge amount of fire element energy stones, all kinds of energy spring water, and countless fresh fruits. Little Kair, who could never digest so much energy and food, had turned into this fat and sluggish appearance. Well, people will mistake you for a fat hen and will never think that you actually have the phoenix bloodline. Wu Qi shook his head and sighed at Princess Zhonglu, who had a big smile on her face, and said, "This is good, no one will guard against her." Really no one will guard against her. Little Sparrow chirped lazily for a few times, then opened its beak and spat out a large amount of grape seeds, which landed on a towering tree far away. After that, it let out an unsightly burp. If those noble, sacred, pure-blooded phoenixes saw little Kair right now, they would most likely immediately kill her and conveniently kill Wu Qi and the others to silence them. That would be a great disgrace to the Phoenix clan. After waking up Lord Xianxing, who was immersed in the state of enlightenment with an incantation, the four of them gathered together and discussed for a while. Suddenly, a cloud flew over from afar, on which stood a little Taoist boy. "Uncle Masters, Ancestral Grandpa has decreed that you can leave the heart-cleansing pool now to prepare for the match in a month's time. Uncle Masters, Please leave the back of the mountain as soon as possible and do not stay any longer." While shouting, the little Taoist boy fished out a spirit talisman and shook it casually. The talisman turned into ashes, and a bright light shot out from it. Instantly, the heart-cleansing pool was filled with smoke and clouds, while the starlight reflected from the water changed abruptly. Now, the heart-cleansing pool no longer had the miraculous effect of helping one gain enlightenment, and only had the effect of emitting cold air and raging flame at noon to help one cleanse one's heart and face the wall. Cupping his fist at the little Taoist boy, Wu Qi fished out a storage bag and threw it casually. The bag flew over 1 mile away amidst a breeze and fell into the little Taoist boy's hand. The little Taoist boy was taken aback. He sent his divine will into the bag, and was immediately taken aback by the 100 upper-grade energy stones inside. Without hesitation, he cupped his fist and thanked Wu Qi. "Thank you for the generous gift, Uncle Master. I'll take my leave now." The little Taoist boy left happily, while Wu Qi and the others stepped onto the cloud and flew leisurely towards Greenwood Peak. Right after they left the back of Green Cliff Mountain, Catfish Flood Dragon cried out, "Aren't you hungry? We haven't eaten a single grain of rice for over a year, and I'm very hungry." Catfish Flood Dragon's eyes darted quickly. She raised her right hand and gestured while saying, "Over the past year, I've been traveling with my nascent soul. 5,000 miles east of Greenwood Peak, there is a very large valley. There are many demon beasts raised there, and all of them are fat and delicious." Lord Xianxing gave Catfish Flood Dragon a glare, then rubbed his belly and said with a dry smile, "I've been strolling around that place for a few times these days. Yes, they are fat and delicious, but it is a place where Yuan Hua sect raises demon beasts as demon pets or mounts for their disciples. Our tolerance is not small." Wu Qi held Princess Zhang Li's hand and did not pay any attention to them. Lord Xianxing and Catfish Flood Dragon's true forms were enormous, and they could easily devour over 100 demon beasts in one meal. As for the demon pets and mounts raised by Yuan Hua sect, they were too embarrassed to eat them. Princess Zhang Li chuckled and said, "Well, we'll just find a mortal city and buy a few thousand livestock. Those longbow people in Wu Qi's tribe are also fond of blood and flesh. Haven't they been complaining about wanting to eat meat and drink wine every day lately?" Wu Qi nodded and flicked his finger, causing the spirit breeding ring to emit a large sheet of white light. While the four of them were chatting and laughing along the way, Princess Zhang Li's ears suddenly twitched, and she turned to look down with a cold face. Following Princess Zhang Li's gaze, Wu Qi looked down as well. What he saw made him feel a surge of anger rushing up to his head. Before Wu Qi could react, Princess Zhang Li's body flickered and reappeared on top of a small hill several tens of miles away. She raised her little hand and gave a series of slaps. On top of the hill, 2 young Taoists clad in green Taoist robes rolled and fell to the ground, their teeth spraying out like popcorn and their faces smeared with blood. While the 2 young Taoists were still rolling on the ground, Princess Zhang Lu rushed over and stomped hard on their heads. Dozens of clanging noises rang out in a row, and the heads of the 2 young Taoists sank about a foot deep into the fertile soil, smearing their faces with mud. In the herb field off to the side, the 2 young girls whom Catfish Flood Dragon and Lord Xianxing saved from Yun Wuqi of Luo Ling sect over a year ago were kneeling pitifully on the ground. Their coarse Taoist robes were torn and ragged, exposing large patches of fair and tender skin, and a few glaring whip marks were left on their skin. Princess Zhang Lu stomped hard on the heads of the 2 young Taoists and snapped furiously, "I've ordered my men to take good care of them, but how dare you torture them? Damn bastards! Who gave you the courage to do that?" Upon seeing Princess Zhang Lu, the 2 young girls burst into tears at the same time. They rose to their feet, grabbed Princess Zhang Li's sleeves tightly, and refused to let go. Wu Qi flew down with a dark face, looking coldly at the 2 unconscious young Taoists who were stomped by Princess Zhang Lu. He snorted coldly and said, "What a bunch of fools! What are you doing? Are you bullying a new disciple?" Right at that moment, a furious roar was heard coming from a distance. "How dare you bully my disciple? This immortal master is the manager of this thousandly herb mountain. You dare to beat up this immortal master's disciple in front of this immortal master? Amidst the furious roar, a beam of green light shot over. It was a white-faced Taoist with a cultivation base of mid-stage nascent soul realm, riding on a sword and charging over angrily. Gone too far? Wu Qi rolled his eyes and snapped, "Lao Tzu, I'll let you know what it means to go too far. Catfish flood dragon, eat them." Saliva was dripping down from the corner of Catfish flood dragon's mouth as she flew over while roaring happily, grabbing one of the Taoists and swallowing him whole. Before she could swallow the second Taoist, Lord Xianxing had arrived on a cloud, his head transforming into the shape of a flood dragon as he swallowed the other young Taoist. The white-faced Taoist, who was riding on a sword and charging over, roared furiously. With a shake of his hand, dozens of thumb-sized thunderbolt beads shrouded in purple mist fell down from above, enveloping Wu Qi and his company. Chapter 389. Each of the thunderbolts was about the size of a thumb. They were condensed by Yuan Hua sect's heaven immortals using a mystic technique found in the unity scripture of inaction, which allowed them to gather the remaining energy of thunderbolts amidst the raging storm. The thunderbolts produced naturally by the heaven and earth were especially fierce and overbearing at the very moment when they were about to vanish. The power of one thunderbolt was more than enough to flatten a small hill, and if a nascent soul cultivator was careless, his fleshly body would be severely wounded. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi casually extended his hand and grabbed the air. Several dozens of thunderbolts were wrapped up by the powerful whirlpool unleashed by the hand of Web, then shot down like birds flying into the forest, and were caught in his palm. Then, he clasped his palms together and exerted a tremendous force to firmly suppress the thunderbolts. Although these thunderbolts were powerful enough to severely wound a nascent soul cultivator, they could not explode, and were forcibly suppressed and subdued by Wu Qi with the strength of his fleshly body. The white-faced Taoist was taken aback. The unity thunder he unleashed could be ranked in the top 5 among all the thunder techniques of various immortal sects in Puyo heavenly realm, and its power was extremely astonishing. If not for the fact that he was the chief supervisor of this herb mountain, which measured 1,000 miles in circumference, and had secretly collected some spirit herbs to exchange with his fellow sect members, with his cultivation base and status, he would not have been able to obtain such a large number of thunderbolts. Today, it was Catfish Flood Dragon and Lord Xianxing who had devoured his beloved disciples one after another. That had made him extremely angry, and that was why he had thrown out several dozens of thunderbolts at the same time regardless of the consequences. But, never in his wildest dreams did he expect that Wu Qi could forcibly subdue and suppress all these thunderbolts with just his bare palms. Oh heaven, this was something that not even a nascent divinity cultivator could do. In Yuan Hua sect, only those heaven immortal elders could subdue the explosive thunderbolts with mighty divine abilities using immortal energy. Yet, this young man in front of him could actually do it? The white-faced Taoist howled miserably. He no longer dared to fight with Wu Qi and his companions. With a spin of his sword, he spun and fled. However, right after he turned around, Princess Zhang pointed her finger at him angrily and cried out sternly, "Disperse!" Following Princess Zhang Li's shout, the natural powers surrounding the white-faced priest suddenly dispersed. Along with a loud clang, his sword light dimmed and turned into a 3-feet-long sword, falling on the ground. With a cold snort, Princess Zhang waved her hand, rolled up her sleeves and shouted, "Wind!" Along with a shrill roar, a fierce gust of wind rose from the ground, as if the gate of hell had truly been opened. From the netherworld, a black, dragon-like hurricane roared out and shredded all herbs on this mountaintop. The white-faced priest didn't even have the power to fight back. Deep in the eye of the hurricane, he howled in pain as he was rolled up into the air by the hurricane. His body spun swiftly in the hurricane like a windmill. Spinning at a high speed, the white-faced priest was like a piece of cloth in a flail machine. His blood slowly crushed his blood vessels and muscles, causing large amounts of blood to spurt out of his body. Squatting on Princess Zhongli's shoulder, little Care, who was as fat as a piglet, flapped her wings with great difficulty, staring fiercely at the white-faced Taoist, who was spinning rapidly in the air about 1 mile above the ground. She opened her mouth and let out a clear chirp. The surrounding area suddenly became hot, and along with a thunderous boom, the black hurricane around the white-faced priest suddenly turned into a raging red flame. The black wind condensed into a raging flame. The huge ball of wind and fire exploded, and the white-faced Taoist fell from the sky with a miserable howl. All the bones and flesh in his body were blown into pieces, and only the upper half of his body was barely intact. With such a serious injury, without top-grade magic medicines, his body would be destroyed for 3 to 5 years. Princess Zhongli gave the white-faced priest a sideways glance, then gently stroked the heads of the 2 girls standing next to her and said softly, "Peppermint, Angelica, come with me. Let's see who dares to bully you again." Even as she spoke, Princess Zhongli's anger didn't dissipate. With a hint of anger, she asked, "I asked you to stay in Greenwood Peak, so why did you come here and get whipped?" Peppermint and Angelica were the 2 girls saved by Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flooddragon in Green Cliff Immortal Market. Their parents were ordinary herb gatherers in the mortal world, who usually went deep into the mountains and forests to collect herbs. They would sell ordinary herbs to the herb shops in the mortal world, and if they found some rare spirit herbs, they would send them to Green Cliff Immortal Market in exchange for 1 or 2 energy stones. Relying on this method, their parents managed to save some money, which they used to exchange for a basic energy refinement technique for the sisters. With the help of the Qi refinement technique, the 2 sisters managed to cultivate a meager amount of inner force. On the other hand, as their parents had been traveling through the mountains and forests all year round, they had inhaled a large amount of poisonous miasma, causing their bodies to deteriorate day by day. In the end, the sisters could only go deep into the mountains to collect herbs, using them to support their family and accumulate energy stones for their cultivation. If not for Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flooddragon's help in Luoling Pavilion, the sisters would have been taken away and used as cultivation vessels. However, Wu Qi and Princess Zhongli had taken a fancy to their excellent cultivation aptitude. Therefore, they brought them back to Greenwood Peak and asked them to stay in Yuanhua sect, preparing to let them join the ranks of Yuanhua sect's outer sect disciples. However, they did not expect that after 1 year and 5 months of facing the wall in Heart Cleansing Pool, when they came out, they saw them being brutally beaten in Herb Mountain. How could they not be filled with anger? As the elder sister, He was a little braver. Clutching tightly onto Princess Zhongli's sleeve, she stammered and told them what had happened during the past 1 year. With Immortal Greenstaff's help, the sisters had successfully passed the aptitude test and joined Yuanhua sect, temporarily being listed as outer sect disciples. However, outer sect disciples did not have the right to stay in Greenwood Peak, as they were under the unified management and distribution of the sect. Every disciple of Yuanhua sect had to go through an uncapped probation period of at least 3 years, during which they would have to serve Yuanhua sect on their own. They were either chopping firewood, planting trees, cultivating herbs, or building new buildings and houses. In short, all the menial work in Yuanhua sect was done by these outer sect disciples who had just joined the sect. Those who performed well, were loyal and diligent, would be taught the most basic energy refinement technique after 3 to 5 years. With that, they would be freed from all the menial work and be able to focus on their cultivation. If they did not perform well, or did not please their masters, they would have to work hard until they died. After all, there were countless mortals on Green Cliff Planet, and there were countless mortals who were suitable for cultivation. Therefore, it was not easy to find a 3-legged frog. Therefore, as long as Yuanhua sect spread the word that they were short of outer sect disciples, countless people would cry and scream, trying to squeeze into the sect. Since Immortal Greenstaff was taking care of Peppermint and Angelica, they were assigned to Herb Mountain, which was the most relaxing place among the outer sect disciples. Every day, they would have to loosen the soil and water the herbs that were assigned to them. Their days went by very easily. On top of that, Herb Mountain was filled with abundant natural energies. When they were free, they could cultivate on their own. In just a few months, their cultivation base had increased by a few years. However, ever since Immortal Green staff brought all the disciples of Greenwood Peak into a secluded cultivation, preparing for the match with Huiling sect, a nightmare suddenly befell the sisters. Taoist White Sparrow became the elder of Spirit Herb's Palace, who was in charge of all the affairs in Yuanhua sect's Herb Mountain. Suddenly, the workload of the sisters increased by 30 times. Despite their young age, they were asked to take care of all the spirit herbs in the herb fields on the 5 great mountains. Once they failed to complete their daily tasks, they would be punished by having their food and water cut, whipped, and scolded rudely by some supervisors who were also outer sect disciples. Fortunately, the sisters were used to suffering hardships since they were young, or they would have been tortured to death by these people in just a few days. While sobbing, He told Princess Zhang Lu everything that had happened. Angelica just kept grabbing Princess Zhang Li's sleeve, staring nervously at Princess Zhang Lu with her pale little face. Both sisters' bodies were trembling slightly. Obviously, they were terrified. Lord Xiansheng burped, then walked slowly before the pale-faced Taoist, who was at his last gasp. Laughing strangely, he said, "Actually, when I was in Longyuan River, I would occasionally catch a handful of cultivators and have them as a sumptuous meal. After all, I have the body of a demon dragon, and it is perfectly justified for me to eat humans." Catfish Flood Dragon, who had just been swallowed by the young Taoist, strode over to the pale-faced Taoist. She reached out her hands to pinch and stroke the body of the pale-faced Taoist, and suddenly, saliva began to gush out of her mouth. She swallowed a mouthful of saliva, then said smilingly, "The higher the cultivation base, the tastier they are. Humans are just like spirit herbs in the woods. The older they are, the better their taste will be, and the richer their flavor will be." The two evil dragons stared at the pale-faced Taoist from both sides, sizing him up from head to toe. It frightened him so much that his face turned blue, and he cried out hysterically, "Help! Help! This has nothing to do with me. It was Uncle Master Huan Yi who asked me to do this. You can't kill me, you can't eat me. I'm the disciple of Immortal Tai Yu from Tsangmu Peak. You can't kill me. You can't kill me." Tsangmu Peak was the third peak in Yuanhua sect after Green Cliff Mountain. Immortal Tai Yu was the elder of Yuanhua sect's inner sect, in charge of all the affairs in the sect. He was the third person after Taoist Min and Taoist Qi. In fact, Immortal Tai Yu's cultivation base was slightly stronger than Taoist Min and Taoist Qi. If not for the fact that he was not Patriarch Yuanhua's direct disciple, and only merged his entire clan into Yuanhua sect after Yuanhua sect was established, after wiping out all the powers on Green Cliff Planet, his status would be even higher than Taoist Min and Taoist Qi. Obviously, all the affairs in Spirit Herb's Palace were managed by Immortal Tai Yu, and naturally, the chief supervisor of the 1,000 miles wide Herb Mountain was his disciple. Usually, Immortal Tai Yu formed his own branch in Yuanhua sect, and he was supported by a few elders of Heaven Immortal Realm. Vaguely, he was the third strongest power in Yuanhua sect, after Taoist Min and Taoist Qi. If Wu Qi were to hurt his disciple, it might arouse Immortal Tai Yu's dissatisfaction toward Taoist Qi's branch. Once that happened, the implications would be too great. The white-faced Taoist let out a few cries, then looked at Wu Qi with a pitiful expression and said, "Those two damned good-for-nothings are just outer sect stewards. So what if they are dead? As for me, I've already acknowledged Patriarch Tai Yu's 9th disciple as my master, and I'm really the successor of Tsangmu Peak. Senior brothers, please spare me." Wu Qi looked at the white-faced Taoist and could not help but shake his head. Immortal Tai Yu's grand disciple? If that was the case, this man's seniority was equal to that of Patriarch Jiang Yun, and he was the uncle master of Wu Qi and his companions. But he was a little too spineless. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi was about to deal with this white-faced Taoist when a red light flashed across the sky. Soundlessly, a handsome Taoist with a ruddy complexion and white hair appeared before everyone. A faintly discernible immortal pressure forced Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon to retreat. The Taoist frowned and asked in a cold voice, "What happened?" Wu Qi gave the Taoist a look. He had a youthful face, white hair, and a beardless face. Who else could he be but immortal Taiyu? Trouble was knocking on his door. Wu Qi sighed inwardly. Chapter 390. However, it was a pity that the person he bumped into was not one of those moral cultivators who followed the rules, but Wu Qi. Bam! Wu Qi and immortal Taiyu collided head-on with each other. Not even a single bit of energy leaked out from their clash. Neither of them used any divine abilities or magical powers, and it was just a clash of pure physical strength. Wu Qi's body trembled, and his Taoist robe suddenly turned into a puff of dust that drifted away in the air. On the other side, immortal Taiyu's pale face turned as red as blood. His body swayed, and he took 1, 2, 3 steps back uncontrollably. Looking at Peppermint's badly mutilated back in horror, immortal Taiyu glared fiercely at the white-faced Taoist, then swung his hand and gave him a slap on the face. Slap. A powerful force exploded inside the white-faced Taoist's body, shattering all his bones and flesh and splattering blood in all directions. The white-faced Taoist was now in the same state as the white-faced Taoist, and his injuries were even more severe, making him look even more miserable. He had done the right thing by displaying his overall strength appropriately. From today onwards, Wu Qi was the strongest man in Yuanhua sect below the Heaven Immortals. After absorbing the blood crystals of so many Heaven Immortals, the strength of Wu Qi's fleshly body could no longer be measured with common sense. Princess Zhongli's words rendered immortal Taiyu speechless. After a full 15 minutes, immortal Taiyu smiled bitterly and said with an unsightly expression, "You juniors are really, hee, aren't you afraid that I'll use my strength to suppress you? Wu Qi, Zixian, Xiansheng, Siyu, even if you join hands, you won't be able to withstand a single strike from me. If I kill you with the crime of deceiving your master and betraying your sect." Upon hearing Wu Qi's words, immortal Taiyu's brows twitched. Suddenly, he roared with laughter and said, "Excellent! Excellent! I can't believe I've been taught a lesson by you today." Amidst his wild laughter, he suddenly raised his right palm and thrust it forcefully towards Wu Qi. There were no astral winds or lightning. Immortal Taiyu did not use any divine abilities or magic powers. He simply relied on his fleshly body to send a palm strike towards Wu Qi. From today onwards, Wu Qi, Zixian, Xiansheng, and Siyu, the disciples of Greenwood Peak, will be Yuanhua sect's 5th-generation first-seat disciples, and will have the right to supervise their fellow disciples. All the disciples of Yuanhua sect are not allowed to disobey. Dozens of streams of divine sense retreated gracefully like swimming fishes. Only one, which belonged to Patriarch Yuanhua, suddenly spread out in all directions. After that, all the disciples of Yuanhua sect heard his voice at the same time. Moreover, Wu Qi cultivated a Xiantian cultivation technique, and the Zhen Yuan in his body was composed of Xiantian qi. The innate qi could nourish the foundation and stabilize the source. The innate earth qi could strengthen the fleshly body. The innate wood qi could strengthen the life force. The innate water qi could make the fleshly body extremely flexible. The innate fire qi could increase the explosive force of the fleshly body, and the innate metal qi could increase the lethality of the fleshly body. As Wu Qi possessed the innate aura of 5 elements, although he still had the fleshly body of a cultivator, it was more than enough to fight against the immortal body of a heaven immortal. On immortal Taiyu's palm, which was as fair as jade, was a crimson fist mark that had sunk half an inch deep into his palm, nearly piercing through it. Without showing any sign of weakness, Wu Qi took a step forward and said with a stern voice, "This is Yuanhua sect's headquarters. I don't think Ancestral Uncle Master has the ability to cover the sky with one hand, right? Moreover, although Ancestral Uncle Master is a 30th tier heaven immortal, he is severely wounded, and currently only has the overall strength of a 35th tier heaven immortal. If I may be so bold, a heaven immortal with such a cultivation base is nothing in my eyes." With a flick of his sleeve, a cloud rushed out from under immortal Taiyu's feet. Stepping on the cloud, he flew straight towards Taoist Qi's humble peak. Upon seeing that his grand disciple was severely wounded, Immortal Tai Yu simply separated a thread of his prime energy essence and injected it into his body, helping him to recover. A thread of prime energy essence of a 30th tier heaven immortal was almost equal to all the life force of this pale-faced immortal. Naturally, his injuries were quickly healed, and very soon he returned to his peak condition. In fact, his condition was much better than before he was wounded. After forcing Immortal Tai Yu back with a punch, Wu Qi patted the Black Dragon's spirit ring. The Black Dragon's soul flew out abruptly, opened its mouth and gave a furious roar at Immortal Tai Yu. Wu Qi said coolly, "I'm lucky. There is a heavenly dragon soul in this ring, and what I'm cultivating is the dragon transformation script." Wu Qi breathed out a long breath. Loud creaking noises came from all the joints in his body, and only then did he retract the dragon transformation script. Cracking noises could be heard coming from the joints of Wu Qi's right arm. Slowly, he stretched out his swollen and sore palm and pointed a finger at the pale-faced Taoist. The Taoist's body, which was badly mutilated by the explosion of wind and fire, healed quickly, and all the broken bones, flesh, and meridians were quickly regenerated. Immortal Tai Yu's cultivation technique focused on the balance of yin and yang, nurturing a thread of life force in one's body. Although it was not suitable for fighting and killing, it was a top-notch technique when used to nurse one's fleshly body, heal illnesses, and cure people. Immortal Tai Yu waved his right hand, shattering the pale-faced Taoist's nascent soul on the ground. Then he grabbed the pale-faced Taoist and threw him several thousand miles away, out of Yuan Hua sect's mountain gate. After that, Immortal Tai Yu cried out sternly, "Yuan Yu, you have failed to teach your disciple properly, allowing him to bully new disciples in the sect. You will be punished by facing the wall in the heart-cleansing pool behind the mountain for 3 years." Wu Qi smiled faintly and did not offer any explanation. He had cultivated the dragon transformation script, and had completed the 3 transformations of Flood Dragon. As a result, his fleshly body was a few times stronger than peak-stage nascent divinity cultivators who specialized in body cultivation, allowing him to fight head-on against a 36th-tier heaven immortal who specialized in body cultivation. What Immortal Tai Yu focused on was the tempering of the immortal soul and the cultivation of Tao, magic, and divine abilities. Although his immortal body was very strong, how could it be compared to the current Wu Qi? Wu Qi pulled Bo He's little hand and asked her to take 2 steps forward. Then he spun her around, exposing her back that was riddled with scars to Immortal Tai Yu. Grinning coldly, he said, "Grand Uncle Master, please take a look. If we are talking about disciples from the same sect killing each other, who was the one who struck first?" Wu Qi rolled his eyes and said with a cold grin, "What's so strange about that? Bo He and Angelica have an excellent latent talent. Compared to them, the 2 repulsive disciples who were devoured are worse than pigs and dogs. 2 excellent disciples were whipped for no reason, and naturally, those 2 rascals should pay with their lives. Do jade artifacts and rubble really have the same value?" Taking in a deep breath, Immortal Tai Yu said in shock, "The dragon's body cultivation technique? Wu Qi, you are actually a dual cultivator of life and death? Moreover, the strength of your fleshly body is actually comparable to the immortal body that this poor Taoist painstakingly cultivated for millions of years? Even though this poor Taoist only cultivates the primordial spirit and doesn't focus on cultivating the fleshly body, after so many years of tempering with immortal energy, this poor Taoist's fleshly body is strong enough to carry mountains and overturn seas. Your fleshly body is actually comparable to a heavenly immortal?" Immortal Tai Yu was stunned for a long time. Then he pointed at the white-faced Taoist and said coldly, "That?" After a slight pause, Immortal Tai Yu said coldly, "Senior Brother Tai, White Sparrow is not suitable to be the spiritual medicine hall master. Tai Yu cannot discipline him. Please find someone else." The moment the white-faced Taoist's injuries were healed, he immediately jumped up and hugged Immortal Tai Yu's thigh. "Grandmaster, please seek justice for this disciple. They swallowed my 2 disciples alive. They ate them. They swallowed them in one gulp. They even injured me and are planning to eat me as well." Raising her head arrogantly, Princess Zhonglu said coldly. Zixian and Wu Qi only seek fairness in their actions. If Grand Ancestral Uncle can be fair, Zixian and Wu Qi will do as you say. If you can't, then don't blame us for not giving Grand Ancestral Uncle any face. Sighing lightly, Immortal Tai Yu nodded and said, it is Tai Yu's fault for not teaching them properly, allowing them to do such a shameful thing. However, since they were innocent and punished their fellow disciples, they will naturally be punished according to the rules of the sect. You guys were too ruthless. 2 of your disciples were actually swallowed alive. You guys are too daring. First, he injured his own disciples to show that he was fair and decisive. Then he punished Wu Qi for being too ruthless. Immortal Tai Yu's methods were indeed extraordinary. A wild roar rang out. Suddenly, golden dragon scale-shaped veins flashed across his skin, and muffled noises rang out from all his joints like thunderclaps. His body grew taller by over a foot, and his muscles expanded by about 2 times. He circulated the 3rd transformation of the Flood Dragon transformation art. Godly power rumbled within his body like thunder. With a deep roar, he punched towards Immortal Tai Yu's palm. Tai Yu nodded subconsciously. Just as he was about to say something, Wu Qi interrupted. Disciple is bold enough to say that all the outstanding disciples of your clan will die prematurely. Even if they don't die prematurely, they won't be able to cultivate to great heights in the future. Even if they manage to cultivate a few nascent souls, they will still be killed by others. Sooner or later, they will die a horrible death. Wu Qi laughed coldly. He paused for a moment, then turned to Immortal Tai Yu, who had an unsightly expression on his face, and said, Disciple, are you happy with what Disciple has said? Immortal Tai Yu narrowed his blurry eyes, which were not big to begin with. His youthful face and white hair now had a hint of haziness in them. He snorted coldly. However, his cold snort, together with his blurry eyes, did not have any deterrence. He gave Wu Qi a glance, then turned to look at Princess Zhonglu, who stood behind Wu Qi and said coldly, Yuanhua sect forbids the killing of fellow disciples. This is the most serious offense according to the sect rules. After a moment of silence, Immortal Tai Yu shook his head with a wry smile on his face. He pointed at the timid Peppermint and Angelica and said, although both of them have excellent latent talents, it does not mean they will be able to cultivate to great heights in the future. On the contrary, jade ware and rubble, are they worth the same price? Once again, Wu Qi rudely interrupted Immortal Tai Yu. He took a step forward, casually pulled out a folding fan from Black Dragon Spirit Ring, opened it, and waved it a few times. Grand Uncle Master Tai Yu, are there any outstanding disciples in your clan? He asked coldly. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi interrupted Immortal Tai Yu and said, they are merely clay pots. How could they be compared with pearls and precious gems? It was a declaration of his stance. Immortal Tai Yu did not show any respect to Taoist Min. He had sided with Taoist Qi, and even struck the iron while it was hot by paying a visit to Dateo Peak. It was a blatant show of goodwill and declaration of his stance. By punishing his own disciple and paying a visit to Taoist Qi, it proved that Immortal Tai Yu had chosen to be close to Taoist Qi's clan, and had given up on Taoist Min's clan. Immortal Tai Yu opened his narrowed eyes, and the blurry look in them vanished. Slowly, he straightened his back, and like a sharp sword that had been unsheathed, he shone with a cold gleam that made one shudder. Wu Qi, oh Wu Qi, you have gone too far with your words. There is no enmity between you and Tai Yu, so why must you curse his juniors like this? Immortal Tai Yu had a blurry look in his eyes. It meant that he had just woken up from a deep sleep, and his eyes were still covered with the gunk, and he had no idea who he was. Feebly, he gave Wu Qi a look, then asked again with a cold voice, what happened? Princess Zhonglu took a step forward, pulling Peppermint and Angelica along with her, and said with a sneer, if that is the case, why must Grand Uncle Master curse Peppermint and Angelica, 2 innocent young girls? Could it be that just because Grand Uncle Master's juniors are human beings, Peppermint and Angelica should die? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.